The open session of the Tahoe Forest House District is now open. Are there any deletions or corrections? I'm sorry, we need to have our report from closed session.
Thank you, Chair. The board heard 7 items in closed session this evening. Items 7.1 through 7.3 were, those reports were received on a 5-0 vote. There was no reportable action on 7.4, and 7.5 and 7.6 were also approved on a 5-0 vote. That concludes my report.
Thank you for that. Are there any deletions or corrections to the posted agenda? If not, we'll move on to audience input. And this is an opportunity for members of our community to address any item that's not on the agenda. And if you are going to be giving us any kind of audience input, we ask that you come up to the microphone, give your name for the record, and then you have your 3 minutes to address your issue with the board or your concern or your comments. As you know, we're covered by the Brown Act, which we will be having a presentation on, where it can't be discussed because it was not agendized. But know that we're hearing what you're saying and we'll take it under consideration. So does anybody have audience input? Okay, well, I've been practicing that speech for a little while now. Okay, can I have any audience input from our Employees Association?
Hi, I'm Julie Maria, President of the EAP Employees Association of Professionals. Thank you, board, Erica Wong. Thanks for
Microphone?
Microphone? Oh.
Really? No one's ever told me to turn a microphone on. That's so weird. Thanks for your time and investment, for being here. I know, all our time is valuable. Sheila, the president of the EA, and myself met with the Values Committee and Whit Kiefer just the other day, and we had a great conversation. So we just wanted to say we really appreciate the increased communication from you guys to us, the membership, in regards to what's happening with the CEO succession. The updates on the website, thank you for that. That was something that we were really invested in, and we still encourage those open forums. If that's something that we're still discussing, the membership's very interested in that. Membership's also interested in the progress going forward and the plans. So we're thankful for the opportunity to give whatever input that we might be able to give. But we look forward to this process, and that's all I have to say.
All right,
Thanks so much.
so much.
Thank you.
Can I just say how nice it is to have the reports?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item on the agenda is the Medical Executive Committee meeting consent agenda, and that's Dr. Koch and Dorothy.
Okay. So Dr. Koch giving the consent agenda. There is one item under the consent agenda, and it relates primarily to tuberculosis testing. And we are modifying our policy to comply with the new state policy so that instead of requiring screening for tuberculosis every year, we're now only requiring it every 3 years. But while we were looking at the policy, we cleaned it up by adding the risk statement and by changing physician to medical staff member so that it's more inclusive. But the only meaningful change was the TB test going to every 3 years instead of every 1.
All right.
And that's our only policy.
Any questions about the policy on vaccination and tuberculosis screening? If not, no? Anything from our audience? Can I have a motion to approve the Medical Executive Committee meetings consent agenda? Can I have a motion?
I move to approve the Medical Executive Committee consent agenda as presented.
A second. Okay, thank you. So we have a motion with a second to approve the medical staff consent agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
That's a little harder to say than you might think.
So it is approved as presented. Thank you so much, Dr. Koch and Dorothy.
Thank you.
Our next item is the consent calendar, and this is usually non-controversial issues that are on that, or reports or policies, but the board has the opportunity to pull any of them for further discussion. Are there anything that we need to pull beside the minutes from the special meeting?
No.
No? Does staff want to pull anything? No? Does the audience want to comment on any of the items? Okay, then,
For the entire open agenda?
pardon me?
Are you talking about comments for the entire open agenda?
Yes.
Okay.
For the consent agenda
Consent
only.
calendar, no.
Our reports.
Okay, can I have a motion? Can we discuss this special meeting minutes now, or do we have to prove?
No, we'll pull
Pull it,
that per your
and then
direction
that's
and,
okay.
and take it up at the end per the agenda item.
Can I have a motion to approve the consent calendar with the elimination of the approved minutes for the special meeting, item 15.1.1?
So moved, Dale.
It's been moved by Director Shamlin, second by Director Brown. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? So the consent calendar is approved without the minutes of the special meeting. And if our clerk can remind me when we get to the end of the meeting to do that. Item 16 is our Brown Act review, and David Rudiman, our legal counsel, is going to do a presentation for our board and our audience.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Board of Directors. I have been asked to provide a short education on the Brown Act, in particular on some of the basic rules governing what a meeting is and what it is not. So I've developed this PowerPoint with the assistance of some of my associates. Hopefully it will be informative, and it's going to be a little bit of a dialogue. So I'm going to have some questions. I'm going to solicit some potential answers from the board and potentially from the audience if they want to call out their what they think. I think we can all learn a little bit from tonight's presentation. So this is the agenda for this evening. And really, we're going to be, as I said, we're going to be focusing on what a legislative body is, because the Brown Act governs legislative bodies. It's going to discuss what a meeting is, because the Brown Act governs when a legislative body can have a meeting. And I'm also going to touch on some of the recent legislation about social media use. So, as just to frame our discussion this evening, the Brown Act, it was developed back in the 60s, really in response to a series of articles in the San Francisco Chronicle called Your Secret Government, which related to essentially decisions being made by local government outside of the view of the public and the implications of that. This statement here on the slide is actually in the legislative intent section of the Brown Act. So it really is sort of the animating focus of the legislation, and really whenever you're trying to come up with answers to whether or not you're in compliance with the Brown Act, you kind of have to think back to what it was meant to do. And the point here is that the people have the right to view, hear, and see the deliberations of their government. And so that's kind of the whole animating, it's a Sunshine Act, essentially. So the Brown Act says that all meetings of a legislative body of a local agency shall be open and public, and all persons shall be permitted to attend any meeting of the legislative body of a local agency, except as otherwise provided in the chapter. So we're going to be focusing on meetings of a legislative body, because that is what is governed by the Brown Act. So first, the question is, what is a legislative body? And the Brown Act tells us that a legislative body is the governing body of a local agency. So city councils, board of supervisors, district board, special districts, like the healthcare district here. It's also a local body created by state or federal statute. That's something that we come across much less frequently. And it also applies to a commission, committee, or board or subcommittee of a local agency. So commissions or committees, subcommittees that are created by a city council, a board of supervisors, a district board. So these are the bodies that are governed by the Brown Act, except there are certain things that are not a legislative body, of course. So one thing people hear about and we talk about all the time are ad hoc committees. So the word ad hoc does not appear in the Brown Act, but when people say ad hoc committee, they're usually referring to an exception, a specific exception in the Brown Act for committees that are advisory only. They cannot bind the local agency. They are temporary, so they don't exist forever like a standing committee. They have a limited purpose, so they have a particular job that they're supposed to fulfill. And they are composed of less than a quorum of the legislative body's members. And actually, what's missing here is that it actually says solely, composed of solely of less than a quorum. So what that means is that, so we have a 5-member board, so an ad hoc committee wouldn't be subject to the Brown Act if it was composed of 2 of the board members. It was advisory only, temporary, and limited purpose. If you put a staff member on that ad hoc committee as a voting member, it would no longer be an ad hoc committee that was exempt from the Brown Act, because it would have more than just less than a quorum of the legislative body. It would have 2 members of the legislative body and a staff member. So that would not constitute what's called an ad hoc committee. Also, what is not a legislative body are these special advisory groups. So essentially, this is an advisory body only, that's created by a staff or single member of the legislative body. So, for example, one of my clients is a financing authority. It's a joint powers authority, and the officer that sort of runs the day-to-day, the treasurer, has this working group of different folks from the different members of the Joint Powers Agency, and he has created this working group. It's advisory to just him, and as a result, it's not a Brown Act body. So, for example, Director Shamblin, you could create an advisory body if you wanted to have a few members of the local community advise you as to certain issues related to healthcare or something. That wouldn't be a Brown Act body. It's advisory only, and it's just talking to you. And that also would apply to staff members, so that the acting CEO could do something similar. Those are not legislative bodies. And then public employees are exempt from the Brown Act, so they are not a legislative body.
What if you created an advisory group with employees?
Well, then you would have more than less than a quorum of the legislative body members, and it would now be a Brown Act body.
Okay. That would include-
If it was created by the board
Yep.
to do all the things that are listed on the far left, except it had more than just 2 of you, it also had some staff, then it's now a Brown Act body.
Okay.
So any public employees that would have to be staff of the board or staff of the hospital? Or-
It doesn't matter. If you have an ad hoc committee that has 2 board members plus anyone else, it could be a physician, it could be just a member of the public who has no relationship to the district, it's now a Brown Act body, because it was a committee that was created by the board of directors. Right? So if you go back to this slide, any commission, committee, or board or subcommittee of a local agency. So that is a commission that is created by the board. And if it has more than just 2 board members, it is now a Brown Act body.
Meaning it's not now a commission under that.
It becomes a commission. It becomes a commission, yeah.
Well, I was just referencing your example of Dale could create something for his benefit only.
Correct.
So that wouldn't be board, or is that board?
Correct. That
created?
wouldn't be board. That would just be Dale.
Okay, but what if he said, hey, I'd really like to know what's going on in the cafeteria, and got 5, employees to help him understand what was going on in the cafeteria? Silly
Well,
example.
that raises different questions. That's not a Brown Act issue. That is an issue related to what is governance and what is management. So that would probably run afoul of of best practices in other areas. But that wouldn't be a Brown Act body.
Okay.
Governance issue.
Correct.
Okay, so our subcommittees, like, for instance, our finance committee meets with 2 members.
Mike?
Yep. Our finance committee meets periodically with 2 board members and members of staff.
Right. So the Finance Committee, all of the committees that are called standing committees, those are Brown Act bodies, and your clerk does a wonderful job of noticing those meetings so that the public can attend if they wish.
Yep.
And they are not ad hoc committees because they are not temporary,
Right.
essentially. Even though they have less than a quorum of the board that's on them, because they have a continuing purpose and they're not temporary, they are a Brown Act body.
Right, but they meet periodically, not specifically on assigned dates. We meet as needed.
That's okay.
So that doesn't create the ad hoc.
No. The term ad hoc, as I said, that's just a loose, nomenclature for something that satisfies all of these requirements.
Okay.
And it doesn't have anything to do with how often it
Often you
meets,
meet, okay.
other than the fact that it has to be temporary, right? So if you have an ad hoc committee that ends up existing for 2, 3, 4 years, at some point, it's no longer an ad hoc
An ad
committee
hoc
because
committee,
it's
right.
now, it's basically permanent.
Okay.
Okay, let's talk about what a meeting is. So it's legislative bodies, and now it's when a legislative body has a meeting. These are both quotes from the Brown Act. So a meeting is obviously any congregation of a majority of members of the legislative body at the same time and location, and that can be of virtual locations, to hear, discuss, deliberate, or take action on any item within the subject matter jurisdiction of the legislative body. So this looks like what we have right now. This is a meeting because we're all together at the same time in the same place. We're all discussing, deliberating on things within the healthcare district's subject matter jurisdiction. Notably, it's not just take action, okay? It's hearing, it's discussing, it's deliberating. So it really is any discussion of items that are within your jurisdiction, right? And that goes back to the main purpose of the Brown Act, which is that the people have the right to hear and watch and see what their government is talking about and how they're thinking about particular items and what their rationale is, etc. The other thing that is a meeting is called a serial meeting. And this is what we're going to talk about mostly tonight, because this is the more complicated one. A meeting like this tonight, it's pretty simple. We all we understand that. But a series of communications of any kind, directly or through intermediaries, to again discuss, deliberate, or take action on any item of business that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the legislative body. That is also a meeting. This is a serial meeting.
That one I need clarification on.
Yeah.
I
I'm going to hopefully try to flesh out what that means. And, this is a statute that is not always 100% clear, and there's, it's all kind of depends on the particular facts and circumstances of the situation. But that's what we will be discussing tonight.
So we're going to have further discussion?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Right now.
But let's talk about also what is not a meeting, okay? Because we did what was a legislative body and what's not a legislative body, so now we're doing what's not a meeting. These are the 5 exceptions in the Brown Act. Individual contacts, so that's when you are speaking with your constituents, which is what elected officials do. That's obviously not a meeting, so you don't have to notice any of that. When you go to the town of Truckee for a noticed meeting of the city council, and you come to the podium to speak, even if there's all 5 of you there, that's not a meeting of the district board. You're at the meeting of the town of Truckee. As long as you guys don't sit in the back, all 5 of you or 3 of you, and discuss our agency business, you can go to the town of Truckee meeting, you can go to the Board of Supervisors meetings as the majority of you, and you can go and comment on items that are agendized for that legislative body. That's not, we do not, Martina will not need to notice that for Tahoe Forest. Let me get through the slide and then I'll take questions. Conferences, so that's when you go to ACHD's conferences, right? These are, it may cost money to go to a conference, but the conference is discussing topics of general interest in the in a particular, well, in the area of, in this case, healthcare districts. Those wouldn't be meetings. A community meeting, so if you were to go to, a League of Women Voters candidate forum, right? That's an open community meeting, and all 3 or 4 or 5 of you showed up to that. Again, you can't sit in the back and talk about agency business, but you can participate in the community meeting as any other member would and discuss items that are on that community meeting's discussion list. And then there's an exception for social and ceremonial occasions. This is a small town. When the legislature wrote this, they understood that there are small towns that this was going to apply to. So if 3 of you end up at somebody's wedding, that's okay. If that's a social occasion. But again, you cannot talk about district business, the 3 of you, at that social or ceremonial occasion.
I have a question about conferences.
Yeah, so let me just say, there was just to kind of flesh out conference and community meeting, the AG actually came out in April with an interesting opinion. It's not technically legally binding, but it's persuasive authority. The question was, the mayor of the city of Ventura was going to be giving a state of the city address before the local chamber of commerce, and they wanted to invite the entire city council, and it was a fundraiser for the chamber. So you had to pay a certain amount of money to get in to participate. So the question to the AG was, is this a meeting under the Brown Act, because we're going to have a majority of our council there, such that we need to agendize it, or is there an exception that would apply, particularly the conference or community meeting exception? And the Attorney General said, this is a meeting under the Brown Act, and neither the conference nor community meeting exception applies. And so with respect to conferences, the issue was that a conference has to relate to issues of general interest to the public or to people in the particular area. And the AG said, well, this is just about the city of Ventura, and so it's not broadly applicable enough to fall under the conference exception, because it's not generally something that would be interesting to all cities or to everybody in Ventura County. So it's not a conference. And they also said it's not a community meeting because there is a barrier to entry. You had to pay an entry fee in order to go. And so as a result, actually, I'm not sure if they actually already had, if they already did the state of the city before they got the AG's opinion or not, but they basically said you need to agendize it. So with that, I will take questions from the board on this slide.
Okay, so, sorry. Thank you. So a fictitious hospital district, who shall be unnamed, their board of directors goes to a district hospital conference, and they sit together at a table, they hear a topical presentation, and at the conclusion of the presentation, over lunch, they have a discussion about how that particular topic pertains to Tahoe, to the fictional district. Is that a violation?
Yes, because you're discussing agency business with, if you have a majority of the board of this fictitious district that are discussing agency business outside of a noticed meeting,
Okay.
then that would be a Brown Act violation.
I'm sure glad it was
The fact
fictitious.
is that the conference exception is like the social or ceremonial or the other legislative body exception. It allows the board to be there as a majority and to participate in the conference, to ask questions of the moderators, et cetera, but it does not allow that board to engage in discussions about agency business where there's a majority of them outside of a noticed meeting.
Thank you.
At some point, are you going to tell us the penalties for violation?
I wasn't actually gonna go over that tonight, but
Okay.
we can talk about that later.
It
Was there
would seem
any
there is
other-
some gray area, like if you're at a conference
Oh, yeah.
and you ask a question, all five of us are sitting even at different tables, but I get the microphone and I ask a question.
No, that's fine, that's fine. You're engaged as part of
Well, even if I reference our health system?
I think that's okay, yeah.
Okay.
Because it's something that everyone in the room is privy to, everyone at the conference, and theoretically, anybody who's engaged in this business could be at that conference. And so you are allowed to engage in with the conference material and with the presenters and whatnot.
Let me go back to the individual contacts exception. So that means a board member can talk to another board member, just a single one.
No, what the individual contacts exception applies to is really to discussions with your constituents. So the
on-board.
serial meeting limitation, which we're going to go into next, is the one that will be more relevant to discussions between board members outside of a noticed meeting. But
So individual contacts means people that are non-board members.
yeah, discussions with constituents, discussions with staff, discussions with administration, those kind of discussions. With legislators, your legislature. Is there another question?
So the question I had was, if more than two members of the board wanted to attend, for example, the quarterly medical staff meeting, because currently only two attend, I'm assuming that would be a violation of the Brown Act?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
Unless it was noticed.
Unless it was noticed, okay. But then the public would be invited?
Correct.
Right, yeah, okay. And then along the same lines, okay, so as long as the public were noticed, that would be acceptable?
Correct.
You'd
And welcome
agendize
to
it.
attend. But obviously, that's not going to happen for the medical staff, quarterly meetings, obviously. Okay, all right, that's helpful.
All right.
The food's pretty good.
It is.
Okay,
But it's
so-
not enough for the public.
All right, let's talk about serial meetings. So these are a series of communications where you have eventually a majority of the board that has discussed or deliberated on an item of agency business. And there's basically two types of serial meetings. There's the hub and the spoke, and there's the daisy chain. So the hub and spoke is when you have one person, say person A in the middle, who's the hub, and they talk, and it could be a staff member, it could be a member of the public, it could be a board member, but it doesn't have to be. And they talk to Director Shamblin about something. They find out, what he thinks about, a particular issue that's coming up before the board. And then that person then talks to Director McGeary about the same thing and says, well, Dale thinks that we really should acquire this piece of property. What do you think? And then you say, yeah, I think that's a great idea too. And then that person goes and talks to Chair Wong and says, listen, Dale and Michael, they're all behind this. We really need your support on this. How do you feel about that? Now you have Alice, who knows what both Director Shamblin and Director McGeary think about the acquisition of this piece of property. And you've now discussed or deliberated on an item of agency business such that there's a majority, at least from Alice's perspective, that know about this. And now you have just had a meeting of a legislative body without notice to the public, so the public has not been able to witness that exchange. And that would be the hub and spoke violation of the Brown Act. The daisy chain is similar, but it goes Director Shamblin talks to Director McGarry talks to Chair Wong talks to, et cetera, et cetera.
Telephone.
So in that hub and spoke example, if I talk with Bob and he tells me how he feels about something, and then I talk to Alice, but I don't share with Alice what
Bob has said.
Bob has said. I mean, how many people can I talk to if I don't share
Yeah.
what the
So
others have said?
I think the rule of thumb is you can talk to one other person about a subject, one item, one subject matter item. And after that, you,
Helicopter will be landing at
Okay.
18:58, 10 minutes. Please clear the helipad.
should I wait?
Helicopter will be landing in 10 minutes. Please clear the helipad.
Are you clearing the helipad?
Helicopter will be landing in 10
Get a tow
minutes.
truck.
Please clear the helipad.
Okay, so, so basically, you can talk to one, essentially, the rule of thumb is one person about a particular item. If there's a, like, for example, the acquisition of a piece of property, I'll just talk to Bob about that, and just Bob and I talk about that item. When it comes to, executive compensation, okay, I will just talk to Director Shamblin about that. So that's the only person I talk to. Because the problem is that if you know what Bob is thinking about a particular item, and then you talk to Alice, but you don't tell Alice about what Bob said, that's good. Alice only knows what you think, so she hasn't violated the Brown Act, but you have now discussed with two other people, and you have to include yourself in the counting of the quorum about an item of agency business, and so you individually have then violated.
And then if
Bound
I
Act.
was just talked to Mary, talked to Michael, then I violated it.
If you've, right, because you know what the other.
Because the others think, yeah, okay.
So that's the daisy chain. So these come up in serial briefings, so it can happen, it can inadvertently happen sometimes when staff are trying to provide information to the entire board. That's why often the best way to provide briefing to the entire board without a meeting is to send a one-way email communication, as opposed to having a discussion about it. It can happen with emails, and it can happen on social media and texts.
So as far as emails go, and that's, I think what we do is that it goes to Martina. She sends it out.
Correct.
Blind
That's
copies
why-
to us. But then the question, now you made me lose my question. Okay, so then she would compile those answers and send that out to whoever requested it. Like when I send out something regarding committees or groups or a listing, and I want someone to prioritize it. I want that information back, but it has to go back to Martina, and then Martina gives it to me.
Well, so what Martina should be doing, she's basically communicating something to the entire board.
Right.
That you couldn't that would be more risky for you to do yourself. So she would be able to scrub it of any indication as to, who said what or what someone thought about something, but she could provide a one-way communication to you about information that was relevant for the board to know.
Okay.
But yeah, that's exactly why we blind copy people, because, it doesn't happen, well, it still happens accidentally, but people reply all.
Oh, yeah.
And you end up, after a couple of those, you've got a Brown Act violation. So if you blind copy, then that can't happen. Social media is now actually pretty, you really want to be careful about social media, because you can actually have a Brown Act violation now, even without a quorum, that are commenting on social media posts. So we'll talk about that in a little while. But it can also happen with text messages. Some people have text message chains of a bunch of people. That's dangerous as well. Okay, so now for our quiz, one of our first quizzes. Okay, so tell me when you think the Brown Act violation first occurred. So the first thing that happens is the general manager meets with Commissioner A to discuss her concerns about agenda item number 1. Is there a Brown Act problem there?
No.
Right, it's actually an individual contact, okay? Next, the general manager meets with staff and the general counsel to discuss Commissioner A's concerns about item number 1. Is that a problem?
No.
Right, because Brown Act doesn't apply to the employees. Then the general manager meets with Commissioner B to discuss Commissioner A's concerns. Is that a Brown Act problem?
No, because it's still not a
Two.
quorum.
Right. I mean, first of all, this doesn't really tell us if the general manager tells Commissioner B that I'm telling you Commissioner A's concerns, so we don't know that. And even if he or she did, you've only got 2 people who have discussed and deliberated. Let's assume we've got a 5-person board here, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so that should be okay. But it may not be a best practice because Commissioner A doesn't know that Commissioner B knows what they think about something. And so Commissioner B may inadvertently then talk to Commissioner C, Commissioner A could then inadvertently talk to Commissioner C thinking, oh, I'm only talking to one commissioner about this, but yet there's actually 3 people who
Yeah.
know
Right.
what Commissioner A thinks.
We're assuming there are 5.
Assuming 5-member board, yeah. All right, general manager emails the entire board regarding Commissioner A's concerns. Still okay, because even though the general manager already told Commissioner B, he or she's not telling Commissioner B anything different than they already knew. Certainly not a best practice, but, there would be a better way to just email the entire board about the concern and not necessarily identify Commissioner A.
Definitely blank copy in that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, how about when the general manager meets with Commissioner C now, after all the other stuff has happened, to discuss Commissioner A's concern?
Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably here. Again, it does depend on what the general manager has said to each of these commissioners and disclosed. Did they disclose that this is a concern that a particular commissioner has? And if so, then, yeah, Commissioner A's, now there's 3 people who've been talking about this, essentially.
So, David, I understand how this applies to the elected members, but does the Brown Act apply to the general manager?
No.
So it's only the general manager who has talked to these individuals.
That's correct.
And so how does that then become a Brown Act issue?
Because Commissioner A,
Right.
because Commissioner B knows what Commissioner A thinks, and Commissioner C knows what Commissioner A thinks.
It's the hub and spoke.
So you've got 3 people who all know what Commissioner A thinks.
But the general manager is the one who violates.
The general manager is the hub.
Yeah.
Hub, the conduit.
But that's the one who creates the Brown Act violation.
That's true, yeah.
That was
So
my
yeah, who's
question.
in violation then?
Yeah, that's a good question.
That was
Yeah.
my question.
Because Commissioner C doesn't know that they've talked to Commissioner B.
Correct.
Commissioner A doesn't know anything, because
Yeah.
they were the first one to get
Yeah.
talked to.
Yeah.
I see what that's a good question. I think somebody would be aiding and abetting. I think the general manager would
Okay.
be aiding and abetting a violation here.
Throw them all in jail. Okay.
All right, let's talk about emails. So the general manager emails the agenda to the entire commission, placing their names in the to field of the email. Brown Act violation?
No?
No.
No. Commissioner A replies all and asks whether the other commissioners saw the Giants game. Violation?
No, it doesn't have to do with agency business.
Correct. It's not related to the subject matter jurisdiction of the commission.
Right.
Assuming the commission is not a baseball
Yeah, 'cause it's
commission.
the Giants board.
The Commissioner B replies all and asks whether the commission can schedule a special meeting. There are some disputes as to whether or not, some scheduling is okay with the entire board scheduling, but not discussion of what is on the schedule for a special meeting.
Yeah, it's more procedural than
Yeah,
substantive.
so this is I think there's actually an exception in the Brown Act that says you can actually like schedule the meeting, but I never recommend that people do that, and I know Martina doesn't do that, and that's just because people could do what happens in in column 4, which is accidentally reply all and start talking about moving agenda items and stuff like that.
I raised this question with Steve Gross, who was our previous board
General counsel.
attorney, general counsel. And he said, as long as you don't discuss
Yeah.
the contents and so forth, but you just want to know what.
Are you
who's-
available on Monday for a special meeting?
Those kinds of things, that seems to be okay.
Yep.
Okay, all right.
But Martina doesn't do that because she wants to avoid 4 and 5, which is, 4 is arguably also procedural. It's about scheduling, although query whether moving something to the next meeting could have some substantive implications that the commissioner is actually trying to have occur. And then 5, obviously, that's a problem.
Yeah.
It's probably not a Brown Act violation if a Commissioner D replies all and presents their arguments in support of Agenda Item 3, because everybody knows what only one board member thinks. So it's probably, right, it's not well, I guess a quorum knows what one person thinks, so it's probably a problem.
God.
Best avoided.
Yeah.
All right, so let's see.
I have a question on email. We get emails from constituents, and if you reply to that email, let's just say it's a dialogue about some agency business, because that's what they're asking about. That's okay, because that's a single person, that's a
Correct.
constituent. Now, if you email another board member about agency business, a single one, it's not a verbal discussion, it's an email discussion. That's still protected because it's just one person. But if you hit the button and sent that to everybody, then you've got a problem, right?
Correct. You also, just remember, Director Barnett, you have created a public record. So, yes, maybe with your one email to one of your directors about an item, you haven't violated the Brown Act, but you have created a public record. So that's just something to be aware of.
Is that true for any email of anybody? So if a constituent emails me and I email back, is that a public record?
Probably. Depending upon the content of the email, there may be some privacy protections for the constituent, but that's the only thing off the top of my head I could think of.
And so, again, on email, if there's anything to do with agency business, whether you email or discuss it orally, either way, you could have a Brown Act violation if it's more than 2 people involved.
Correct.
And I suppose that's true of any form of
Yeah.
social media.
Now, social media, which I'll talk about in a second, is a little different. So here, this kind of will frame sort of the issue. Commissioner A posts happy birthday on Commissioner C's Facebook page. Is that a problem?
No.
It's not about agency business. Commissioner B likes Commissioner A's post. Any problem? No. Probably not, because again, it's not about agency business. Commissioner B tags all the commissioners in Commissioner A's post. Again, probably fine, right?
Not agency
agency
business.
business. Commissioner C is just so appreciative of all the birthday love that they like an article that Commissioner B shared on his page about the California Voting Rights Act.
Oh, that was,
California voting, well, it's not
I mean,
agency business.
It's probably, it probably touches on agency business because the Voting Rights Act applies to the
Applies,
agency,
yes.
and we need to comply with it. And people who, I mean, I have not given you the background to know whether or not this is a violation or not, so if you want to guess, you can, but if you want to not, we can move forward.
Right.
What do you think?
I don't know enough about social media to know what all the other people see it.
oh, everybody's,
Yeah.
all the friends see it.
Never go away.
That is so true.
Yeah, it's a like, so you would have to go, I think you'd have to go on that Facebook page to see that
Could you argue that it's?
they liked it. All right, Commissioner A comments on Commissioner B's article saying, we should discuss this article at our meeting. It's just two of them.
But,
Yeah, that should be okay. We should discuss this at the meeting?
but everybody else sees it if they've liked it
Oh, it's
or
on
made a
social
comment
media.
to it. I mean,
Saying that they will discuss it, nobody's taking a position on it, so they're, well, wait a second.
It's
It's
scheduled.
discussing agency
It's scheduled.
business.
Yeah,
You can just, doesn't matter what the discussion is,
you put it out there.
because that's prohibited, you can't discuss.
Yes, so social media is a little bit different. Now, the Brown Act was recently revised, like, just a couple years ago, to specifically discuss how the Brown Act applies to social media. And social media is defined as basically a type of public internet forum. So it would be like a Facebook or a Twitter, or it would be like the comment section of your local, of the Sierra Sun, if the comment section still works. I don't know if it does.
That's available
A
for
message
anyone to
board.
read.
Anybody can look at it, yeah.
Okay.
And the Brown Act says you can use social media to communicate with your constituents, to provide information to the public about the agency, what the agency is up to, or to solicit feedback. What do you guys think about this new quality initiative or whatever? That's permissible. But what you can't do is you can't use social media to discuss amongst yourselves business of a specific nature that's within the subject matter jurisdiction of the legislative body. You cannot have one member post discussions by another member, and you cannot weigh in with likes or emojis. This counts as a discussion. So what this means is that unlike everything else we've talked about, where we're always looking for that magic number of 3, that in the social media context, the magic number is 2 for you guys. Because basically what they're saying is, yes, you can put a post on Facebook saying, tell me what you guys think about, this new initiative. But if, Director Brown likes that question, or even likes one of the answers that a constituent posted later in the string, then that would be a violation of the Brown Act.
You're tipping their hand. Yeah.
It's pretty onerous. It's very onerous, honestly, and it's very difficult to work with. I mean, you really need to be careful about even liking or weighing in on a post, because there could be something above it or below it that one of your other directors, if they already commented on a string, on a post, then it's like you can't do it yourself. I haven't seen this in practice, like actually enforced, but this is the rule, and this is what's in the statute.
So, let me ask a couple follow-up questions. Not social media, but, so, a board member can talk to staff members about board business, correct?
Correct.
Can a board member talk to two staff people about the same board business?
Yes, because again, the Brown Act, the public employees aren't considered part of the legislative body.
So a board member can have dialogue with members of the public, members of the hospital staff on board-related business.
Yeah, I mean, for
Just can't
some
communi-
agencies, there would be more nuance to my answer because they have a planning commission or a design review commission, and so then you have to start thinking about other committees and commissions and, who's on what. But for our purposes, we really don't have any other Brown Act bodies except for the standing committees. And those are all just board members, right?
So the prohibition primarily is you just can't talk to other board members about any board business except in the sessions of the official
Yeah, and
board meetings.
the other point for staff is that they also just can't be a hub.
They can't be.
Right.
And so, and the third point is actually constituents can be a hub too. And so often, and constituents know the least about the Brown Act of anyone usually. And so you often need to, I would recommend that you preface your discussions with your constituents to explain, especially for a group, an interest group that's trying to lobby the entire board to take a particular action. They're going around to each of you individually trying to get your vote for something. You need to be very upfront with them and meaning, listen, I just want to comply with my obligations under the Brown Act and make sure that the public is able to hear the board's deliberations. So please refrain from telling me what one of my other board members told you about the particular initiative that you're interested in talking to me about.
And if they do inadvertently, because they don't know the Brown Act, they say, oh, well, Director McGarry thought this was a great idea. What do I do at that point? Stop and say,
Just explain to them, yeah. I mean,
the Brown Act applies here. Once you've told me that, we can't have a further discussion.
I would just try to explain to them what the rule is and why this rule exists and how this rule really is meant to help people like the constituent hear the deliberations that you're
That's going to be
having.
easy. I just explained the Brown Act to somebody out there in the public who's going, what?
Yeah, I know. But once again, if I talk to somebody and he says, well, you really ought to vote for it because Michael and Bob like it. I've already talked to them about it. Where are you at that point?
At that point, you need to end.
Vaporized, yeah, all right. Yeah,
Your head has exploded.
yeah, right, yeah.
You need to shut that down and explain to the person politely that that's inappropriate and that you've now,
Yeah, but how do you unring the bell?
Well,
there's
you
nothing you can
can't.
do about that.
You just have to shut it down.
Yeah.
I mean, you can always encourage them to attend a board meeting and use public comment for their commentary. I mean, that's a pretty polite redirection.
Yeah.
Director McGarry, did you have a question?
I might talk to you about it later because it's specific to my, like, I'm on LinkedIn talking about healthcare all the time because that's my job.
Okay. Yeah.
So if I talk about healthcare in general, it in theory could apply
I mean,
to here, but
the legislature wants you to talk on social media about, issues related to the agency business. It's just whether or not the other board members are involved in those posts, right?
okay.
You can post all you want about healthcare.
Just not
You can
for us.
you can respond to other people, but you just want to make sure that you don't have any other directors that are on there. LinkedIn is probably a little easier because there's less. I mean, some of these people may not be on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
These people, you people, yeah.
What's LinkedIn?
What's LinkedIn?
I'll talk to you after
People that don't
there's some
work.
curious things.
Those old people that don't know
Those
how it-
old people are used.
Just briefly on blocking and deleting social media, because this just came up in a recent Supreme Court case. This is the holding in Lindke versus Freed. that a public official's social media page is a public forum. So that means that you cannot block people based on the content of their speech. You can only impose time, place, and manner restrictions consistent with the First Amendment. But there's a test that the Supreme Court devised in this case for when a public official's social media page is a public forum. The official has to possess actual authority to speak on, in this case, the agency's behalf, and they have to have purported to exercise that authority when speaking on social media. So it's a fact-dependent inquiry. So is the social media account an official account? Is it a personal account? Is it open to everyone? Is it open to only friends? Do you have a disclaimer on your page related to the fact that this is or is not a public forum? Can members of the public interact? Do you allow comments? Do you not? These are all issues that you need to think about if you are using a Facebook page to engage in agency business or use it to solicit agency business.
Yeah,
so
you can't get
this
rid
is
of
beyond the
haters.
scope of our discussion tonight, but it's just something I want to raise. I don't think we've talked about it in a long time, or recently at least, and so it's something that we should think about. I actually, if the district has a page, that's another thing to look at. But that's just something to raise, and we can talk about that later.
Here's something interesting, because it does relate to us, because in my last campaign, I put out a social media web page that basically gave my history, background, my position on different things within the hospital. And so I don't know whether I don't think I'm a public forum, because I'm just a candidate.
What happened? There was there's a companion case out of San Diego County to this one that was related to something similar, where it was school board members who had run for school board, and they had created a campaign website, and then once they were elected, they kept using that website to interact with their constituents and engage in discussions about school board business with the public, and there was a couple of gadflies that were constantly posting critical things about that particular board member and the school board, and they were blocked by the individual. And so then the question becomes, well, now this person is using this Facebook page to discuss the school board's business and engage with other members of the public, and they're allowing posts. So it looks like because they were a board member, they do possess some authority to speak on behalf of the school district, and they were purporting to exercise that authority. So there could be state action involved, such that blocking them would have, based on the content of their speech, their criticism, would have been a violation of their First Amendment rights. So what you need to do is you need to be cognizant of that, and you need to think about putting a disclaimer on, being thoughtful about allowing what kind of allowing comments or not, and if you're going to allow comments, you need to allow all of them.
Yeah, because there's a haters' Bill of Rights now.
Yeah.
And that's it. Well, I think that as far as the candidate thing is fine. I think you just have to shut that website down afterwards, and then you don't have the problem.
Correct, you can do that as well, yeah. The Lindkey case was out of Michigan, and it was like a city manager who had a personal page that was semi-open, and he would sometimes post stuff about his family, but he would also post stuff about the city sometimes. So there was this gray area as to whether or not he had authority to speak on behalf of the city, and B, whether or not he was actually exercising that. So the court I don't think they actually made a determination, but they laid out this test and they sent it back to the lower court to apply it in that case. So. All right, so we've kind of talked about the substantive stuff, so this is my final quiz. Let's see if you guys, if I was a good teacher or not. So this is a 5-member city council, A, B, C, D, and E. So A calls B to urge her to vote yes on the proposed new tech center. B runs into C at the grocery store and tries to sell him on the tech center idea, but C isn't buying it. Is that a violation?
It's a
say-
consensus, or what do they call it, maybe it's a.
Serial.
Yeah, I would say it
Daisy
was.
chain?
It's a violation.
It's a violation, yeah.
It's a daisy chain
Daisy chain.
violation.
Yeah, I mean, we're assuming that everybody's, when they're talking, they both, B agrees with A, and now B has gone to C, and C says, I say no, and now B, knows what, there's three of them think, so that's a violation.
Yeah.
Now C calls D and tells him to vote no on the tech center. Well, if D doesn't know about B and A, and he just knows about C, then maybe D's okay, but C may have a
He may have a
problem.
violation, D may not. Right.
Okay, nobody talks to E.
That makes sense. Have you met E? Yeah.
No violation.
They're the annoying one on the Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, wait, well, now E's gonna get involved. So A emails E with a plea for the tech center, and E responds with her support. Then A forwards her original email, including E's reply, to C, seeking C's report.
Violation.
That's a problem. Because yes, C knows what E and A and presumably C thinks.
Yep.
So what should C do? Well, this is the same kind of issue that you were talking about, Director Shamblin. In this case, it's not with a constituent, so this is something that you would probably want to talk to the CEO about, talk to me about, and it would be something that we would try to do some education over. All right, so now a resident lobbies A to vote yes on the proposed tech center. And that same resident then lobbies B. Then, later, C. Is that a problem?
Only if they're telling the other, each of them what the other one's thinking.
Right.
Yeah.
That's correct. All right, A expresses her support for the tech center to the city manager. A also tells the city manager that she knows B backs the project. A suggests the city manager can contact C for his support for the project.
That would be a problem.
Yeah.
That would be a violation.
Well, let's see. So A
Tells the city manager.
tells the city manager. So A already knows what B thinks, and now A wants C to contact. So the request isn't a violation to the city manager, but Councilmember A is basically trying to get the city manager to violate the Brown Act by doing that.
Yep.
So please don't put that kind of pressure on Louis.
Yeah, that would be,
That's inappropriate.
that would be a hub type
Correct.
violation.
All right, well, I think you guys passed. So,
Yay. Can we go on with the meeting?
yeah, I did have one thing for you guys to watch,
this is
but
a-
we have one question.
Well, so, this is a wonderful explanation of what we cannot do, and I really appreciate it. I'm wondering, if this board wanted to be perceived as more available to their constituents, what are the legal ways that they could do that? Not violating the Brown Act, if they wanted to be more accessible
To their
to their
constituents,
constituents.
that's up to them. I mean, they can, like I said, it doesn't
Yes, that-
apply to their discussions and their contacts with constituents.
Well, as individuals.
As
Yes.
As a
individuals.
single individual.
I think you're asking if the
The whole
board,
board.
Right.
if we were to have a town hall
You have
meeting.
to have, you can have a town hall meeting, but you just have to notice it. So then you have to go through the notice rules, and that's another presentation, but
Yep.
24 hours for a special meeting. You have to have an agenda that provides a brief general description of what's to be discussed, and you're only supposed to talk about the things that are listed on the agenda. And you're supposed to allow for public comment, et cetera, et cetera.
And it's got to be accessible to anyone who
ADA
shows up.
Does that sort of form allow for dialogue?
No, technically, no. Technically, all the Brown Act requires is that people have the opportunity to hear the deliberations of their local government bodies.
Yeah.
And to comment on them. So you're allowed to come, as we do here, comment about a particular agenda item. But the Brown Act does not give the public the right to engage in discussions with the board at an open meeting. That's up to the board if they want to do that or not. It can be unruly depending on the size of the crowd and not possible. But technically, the Brown Act only requires that the board have their discussions with a majority in view of the public. That's it.
So again, though, if their goal were to create a more, a community perception of accessibility, you know, we're happy to talk to you about this, what's the easiest way for them to do that?
They would have to have a meeting, a notice meeting. Yeah.
Just a public town hall.
Open forum.
Yes, I mean, that's not a legal question, that's a policy question.
Okay, all
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Other question?
My question is, if violations do occur, what are the ramifications? Does it apply to the individual? Does it apply to the board, the organization? And what are the measures that can be taken? Are they monetary penalties? Are there?
Yeah, there's a host of penalties. There's penalties that go from, like a court could issue an injunction to require the board to comply with the Brown Act. That lawsuit, if brought by an individual, that person could get their attorney's fees. There could be requirements, a court could impose a requirement that closed sessions were recorded such that the court could hear them to ensure that no Brown Act violations occurred, if that was within the scope of the question. The Attorney General does have the authority to prosecute an intentional and willful violation of the Brown Act. And so there can be penalties there. Yeah, I believe there are misdemeanor penalties for that, yeah, for a willful violation. There is also a cure and correct process for Brown Act violations. So if a member of the public believed that a Brown Act violation occurred, they would be required to first provide notice to the agency as to what violation they believed occurred, and give the agency an opportunity to try to cure that. But a violation could also lead to invalidation of action by the board. So if the board took action in violation of the Brown Act, they had already agreed amongst themselves to agree to this contract, and then they voted to approve the contract. One remedy would be to find that the contract itself was void and the action was void, and they would have to try to redo it if possible. So those are kind of the different ramifications of Brown Act violations.
So you haven't mentioned, too, that there are exceptions to what has to be discussed in open forum.
Yeah, I
That-
didn't
that
talk
is-
about the closed session.
Closed session,
Yeah,
yeah.
that was beyond the scope
Yeah.
of this. But I did add this one last slide because we did talk a little bit about, public comment and how that's how important it is to the Brown Act that people be allowed to comment on the things that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the agency, even if it doesn't require the board to engage in a discussion about it. So I just thought this was a good public comment that might be interesting.
First off, I love your city of Manhattan Beach. You have great bros. Council, what does it mean to be American? I used to think it meant eating fudgesicles and being tan. And in a lot of ways, I still do. But I think it also means fighting for the ones you love, which is why I'm here to fight for my first and greatest love, Britney Spears. She's going through pretty serious ennui right now, but she's helped me through major bummer. She pretty much guided me through puberty. She's so hot. I almost went to one of her concerts when I was 14, but my dad said, no, you have to do math. Also, it's probably good that I didn't go because I didn't want to destroy what she and Justin Timberlake had. Whether she was stronger in the song Stronger, vulnerable and lucky, or risque and womanizer.
Sir, I don't know what bet you lost, but this is not within the jurisdiction matter of the city of Manhattan Beach.
I promise it is. It's just at the
You
end.
need to get to it now.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Well, basically, I'm trying to get her stoked again. So that's why I'm asking the city of Manhattan Beach to rename the water treatment center the Britney Spears Toxic Water Center after her hit song Toxic. I think that would be a really nice way to pay homage to her. Thank you.
Council, I'm also deeply honored to be here. Chad asked me to sing the song Toxic to you because he figured some people might not know it or it might have slipped your memory. Baby, can't you see I'm calling? A guy like you should wear a warning. It's dangerous. I'm falling. There's no escape. I can't wait. I need a hit. Baby, give me it. You're dangerous. I'm loving it. Too high, can't come down. Losing my head, spinning round and round. Do you feel me now? Oh, the taste of your lips, I'm on a ride. You're toxic, I'm slipping under with the taste of a poison paradise. I'm addicted to you, don't you know that you're toxic? Stay strong, Brittany. Thank you guys so much.
Oh, my God.
They aren't laughing.
Thank you.
That concludes my presentation.
Priceless.
Seriously,
We really could have, but
that really happened, or is that all staged?
no. These guys go around Southern California and do all sorts of really interesting public comments and then post them on YouTube. So
That's their thing.
I think they're actors or something.
Okay.
The blonde dude did one about like sunscreen. He's like, I'm not going to wear sunscreen to promote something. Yeah, I mean, it was, I saw something else.
Okay, well, it was a great presentation, very
my
informative, and left on a high note. Thank you.
Well done, David, well done.
But we have Dr. Yes, she's here, Dr. Flamingo, and is going to do a pediatric presentation. If you'd like, go ahead and like to take a seat and.
This is our clinical manager, Michelle Churchill, so she has a writing presentation as well. So, thanks for having us.
Yeah. Well, welcome, and we've been waiting and waiting.
Sorry, COVID. We're here to present the current state of pediatrics and kind of go through a few things. And so, I'm Ali Flamingo, pediatrician and pediatric medical director, and this is Michelle Churchill, and she is our wonderful, wonderful
Microphone,
leader.
please.
Okay. All right. So today we're talking about just kind of a review of operations, some performance indicators, some achievements and barriers, some future state goals that we have. And we have this quote. I won't read the whole thing, but really a big focus over the last few years has been creating a positive work culture. And we found that that has been the most exciting part of our day, is interacting with each other, interacting with our patients, really enjoying what we do. And that really leads to a lot of creativity, ideas, and collaboration in the office, which has just been great. Take it over.
Okay, so we did a workshop back in early 2022 with Tegria. We went through a lot of our daily struggles and kind of areas where we thought that we could improve upon. And this is just some pre-workshop data. So at the beginning of 2022, our slot utilization in our schedules was only at 67%. And since that workshop with Tegria, as of last year, we had gone up to 94% slot utilization. And so it was a 27% increase over almost 2 years. It was definitely a success.
And what is the name of this organization?
Tegria was the name of the organization that we met with back in 2022. And these are just some statistics I thought it was important to highlight. From 2021 to 2023, we've had a 35% increase in our patient population. Along with that, from 2017 to 2023, our staff increased from 13 to 26. That number does include our providers. And then our turnover rate in 2023 was 10%. And just to give you some perspective, the national average healthcare turnover rate is 23%. This,
Do you mean turnover rate within your staff?
within the clinic staff, yes.
In 1 year.
In a year, yeah.
So the the point to that was that people like working where they work with us.
This is a snippet of our huddle board that we have up in the clinic. Our team meets every Tuesday and we talk through our in-progress projects, anything that's ongoing, are implemented. I won't go through all of these with you, but if you look at the in-progress section, these are just some things that we're working on right now. We've gotten pretty far with our electronic forms, but we're still kind of hoping to go a little bit further with that. But we do meet every week and we discuss things, and other topics do come up from staff, and it's a really good time for us to get feedback and, figure out of other existing problems that we may not be aware of.
And it's great because it's the whole office. So it's the front desk, it's the MAs, it's the doctors, it's the managers, it's the clinic lead, and the leadership rounds occasionally to where they're able to hear what's going on and what we're working on. So it's really collaborative, and it's the same time every week. So if you can make it that week, it's great. And we all try to, but if you don't, it's okay. We try to just update via emails too, which is really helpful, kind of a weekly update email.
I think it's a great idea to have the huddle board, because then you've got to focus on what still needs to be done, what we've done, what we still need to work on, and everybody's working on all those, yeah.
And that's so important too with just the reassessing the implemented actions. I think that's been really meaningful in the office, because oftentimes we'll have ideas and we'll try things out, but there's no real follow-up. And having the Tegria workshop and the Lean conference back in 2022 really changed how we moved through implementing new ideas and protocols. So this is just an overview of our inpatient pediatric operations. I think sometimes we get caught up in all the clinic duties, but we forget about all of our inpatient pediatric hospitalist duties. And so I have here just some numbers from 2019 through 2023. You can see that the births have been pretty stable, about the same number of births, a little bit higher number, but averaging about 350 a year. The transfers, however, to other higher acuity level of care hospitals has gone up. And then our nursery is a level 1 newborn nursery, so we'll keep 35 weeks and above, and we're able to keep patients on heated high flow. But really, it's pretty much a resuscitation effort, and if they're not improving, they need to go to a higher level of care. Of course, we always try to keep the mamas and the families together and the babies. It's challenging oftentimes in our area to move them 2.5 hours apart, but we have been able to keep some of those higher acuity admissions. Actually, we just saw Dr. Vayner in the hallway, and he's on call today, and he has been here all day with 2 critical patients. So we do our best effort to keep them here, but that does impact what our clinic looks like in the day, because we are doing clinic at the same time. So nursery admissions, approximately 1 to 4 per day. These are just average numbers. We do 24-hour call, patient management, and we have the potential for up to 10 admissions per day. We do heated high flow, CPAP, central lines, ventilation, IV fluids, antibiotics, LPs, thoracentesis, circumcision. So we are able to do procedures here at the hospital, and we get great training through UC Davis. We keep up to date with the NRP and PALS. Pediatric admissions 1 to 3 per month, but there's definitely a high volume in respiratory season. That's our busy season, so September through April usually. And we'll see most of our admissions with bronchiolitis, pneumonia, asthma, respiratory issues, needing oxygen, respiratory treatments, maybe IV fluids. And so our capacity right now is we take 6 months and up to 18, and we don't admit patients to the ICU, but we are able to take 4 patients on med-surg. We transfer to UC Davis and Renown mostly. Sometimes we will use Sutter or other hospitals in Sacramento, depending on UC Davis availability. They've been very full lately. And as you know, we have the telemed consult, which is great. That really helps us out, because those doctors can visualize what's going on, consult us in real time during resuscitation efforts. And so UC Davis has been wonderful with their training. Weather challenges, as that has been, there's always an exciting, admission during a snowstorm and can't transfer them out. It makes you feel like you're working in back Alaska wilderness. So the staff really comes together. The labor and delivery staff is just fantastic in how they support, and the nurses are all very experienced, and the house supervisors, I feel like our organization really works well to work together. We do overnight consult calls. We are on that 24-hour shift, so we'll be in clinic throughout the day. And then we'll be taking calls from Truckee and Incline. We will admit patients from the ER here in Truckee. We take parent advice calls. We do the newborn nursery management, and then we do med-surg admissions and management. So that's part of what we do. And so really, what is the value in this? So we're measuring the lifetime value of our patients. We're creating lifetime patients. So quality, safety, loyalty, satisfaction, we've got families who are going to be with a health system for their entire lives. So lifetime retention rate, we're looking at multi-generational, which you see with Dr. Arth, who just retired, and he saw kids and then grandkids and then great-grandkids. And so it's really special to work in this community because we do care so much about each other that it's not just a random face that you see. It's your neighbor. It's somebody who fixed your car. It's whoever it is. And so I think that's really part of why pediatrics is so special here. We are the initial referral access point. So our patient population is going to be moving on to specialist care, whether it's orthopedics or women's health or other specialty care. And we do kind of look at this as not just what the financial contributions are for the patients in the pediatric world, but also downstream revenue. So again, they're going to be with us for their lifetime if they have a good experience to start. And our Press Ganey surveys have been really positive, and they're kind of a good marker of how the culture has improved.
This is just a snippet of some data from a Press Ganey survey from Q2 of this year. So we're comparing it to Q2 of last year. We were in the 11th percentile for patient access. And then as of Q2 this year, we are in the 50th percentile. So it's a 39% increase in over 12 months.
You're going to tell us how you did that?
I actually, when we get to the next slide, I will include some comments. So for ease of scheduling, Q2 of 23, we were in the 7th percentile. Q2 of this year, 49th percentile. Most of this had to do with our workshop that we had with Tegria. We did a lot of work on our templates. We removed a lot of restrictions. We opened up our schedules for basically indefinitely. So our patients can schedule out 2 years if they want to. So that's really helped, the satisfaction. And we've done a lot of work on internal processes with our chart prep and making sure that everybody's set up accordingly for their appointment. And so it kind of decreases that last minute rescheduling because there was an error. So I really think that a lot of that is, I'm not missing anything, that's basically what's contributed to these increases.
We standardized a lot of processes, which helped, and that took out a lot of the errors, and then also opened up more availability with providers. So that was a big part of it too. And I had spoken with Dr. Barta about implementing some of these things in primary care. So hopefully we'll be able to collaborate too with what they're doing with Vizient. So the next thing is just talking about utilization. I'm just going to kind of zip through. I know you guys are tight on time, but just looking at what is productive billable work? So employee availability. And we do a lot of things where we're not doing direct patient care. We're not able to bill for it, but it takes up a lot of what we do. So how can we improve upon that? We've worked on in-basket, RN protocols. Our RNs are phenomenal, and they have done so much work in how they help run the office, and they take in a lot of our phone calls. They do a lot of the MyChart messages. They take away a lot of that indirect care so we can spend time seeing patients. So that has been a huge help. We do the well visit direct online scheduling, which has been very positive. We've assigned PCP, so we now have panel tracking, and we can see the continuity of care has been excellent when you have your own patient and your patient gets to see the doctor that they want to see. The satisfaction goes up and the care is better. So the huddles have been great. There's a lot of things that have been done that are really helpful. Some of the things that have been barriers still, we have a lot of papers for an electronic system. And so we still are doing a 3-point vaccination verification. This is kind of a plug because we have a med scanner, and yet we still have to peel stickers, and the MAs peel stickers, and then they find the providers. And so some of these processes could be improved upon, but we're limited by regulations and rules. So I averaged it out, and we spend 8.73 weeks per year peeling stickers, approximately 350 hours. Of course, chart documentation you can't get away from, but care coordination, scheduling errors, phone calls, my chart messages, again. The scheduling errors, we had really been down on those where it was, it kind of adds to burnout when the providers have to go and recheck and there's errors, and rescheduling is something that patients don't appreciate. So the solutions, we talked about this in March when we presented this to the ACO, is the iPad. That was a good idea. And scribe implementation, telehealth, epic efficiency. One of the big things is we do have a large percentage of our population that is scoring mild or moderate to severe depression and anxiety. And so behavioral health, youth social worker would be huge, or perinatal care coordination support. So there's a lot of things that will, again, allow providers to do direct patient care rather than care coordination. Let our nurses do what they need to do rather than try to coordinate with the community. Website improvement we've been working on, which has been excellent. We've been working with Meg. She's been and Ted has been a big help. And then the pediatric specific schedulers would really decrease errors more. And I'm going to just keep going about those vaccine stickers. But achievements, we've standardized a lot. We are one of the only clinics open 6 days per week, and we've done this all through COVID. I think we should be really proud of ourselves in the fact that we've treated all of our own patients through a pandemic for the last 4 years, sick or not. And it does take a toll on us, and we do have to run at a skeleton crew a lot of the time because we do see the sick, coughing kids. The kinder nights, so outreach to the community, our staff has volunteered their time to do things, to get vaccine education, sign up for well exams. Our high school athlete well child exams, we've had support from multiple different specialties to reach out and get these kids seen, adding about 250 visits. And so we have a very athletic, sporty group of teenagers in Truckee and the surrounding areas. So it's been a challenge with some of the regulations to get everybody seen. And so this has been one of the ways we're trying to innovate and come up with new ideas.
Are those billable hours that you do for the high school?
Yep.
They are.
Yeah, so we do it. We actually did this in our office. This was the first year that we did it. And so we had just the providers that were scheduled for that day. It was additional to what they already work. So they volunteered to work additionally, but we billed as a regular well child exam through insurance.
So did you have those exams timed for a certain period so that parents could bring their kids in?
Mm-hmm. It was scheduled like a regular clinic day, just we only had 30-minute visits, so it was very standardized. Everybody got the same format, and everybody had their forms done before they came. We had a protocol kind of for vaccines and how things moved through quickly. But we did everything that a regular well child exam would include, and the sports physical. And we do vaccines, but there are a lot of vaccines. 10,476 vaccines administered in 2023.
All those stickers.
All the stickers.
All those stickers, guys. So one of the things for access, we're talking about space utilization. Late cancellation and no-shows does seem to pop up a lot because we do have one or two a day on our schedule, and that does limit our productivity and our access. So I think that's something that has been on our minds. Hospitalist duties, like I said, that can really impact your clinic. And then your pediatric specific challenges, so getting a toddler naked on the scale, having to do rectal temperatures, having, I won't go into the graphic details, but there's a lot of bodily fluids. So I think in general, it takes us a little longer to get things done than just having somebody walk in and sit down. And so specialty coordination and care, this is part of where we were talking about behavioral health need. So 12% of Tahoe Forest Health System patients, 12 to 18, meet criteria for major depression. So those are our patients in the community. And then that's our office. So we're a tight-knit group. So when we're talking about space, we've actually expanded into this area. So it's been great. We've been able to utilize this space. We're making processes more efficient. We just got our RNs trained to do EKGs in the office. So we're trying to create more that happens in our own department. A lot of these things are things we've been hoping for, and what big key performance indicators, quality and safety. We've been working on a lot of education. So inpatient education, outpatient education skills. We have an inpatient pediatric medicine quarterly meeting, which Janet's been to, and Dr. Evans, and it's been very helpful to have the administrative support there. And having a pediatric readiness project with the ER, that was a nationwide project that we were a part of, standardizing pathways inpatient in the ER for admissions, for triaging patients, for clinical care, how we are scoring children as they are patients. So we have PEWS, which is kind of the standard scoring tool for how sick a child is, which we also added the respiratory clinical score, which is used nationwide, as well as a tool to say this child maybe does not meet criteria for admission, or this child does, and that has been very helpful with nursing autonomy and in the ER to help us kind of guide through a lot of those situations. We've purchased equipment, CPAP. That bubble CPAP for those newborn babies has been invaluable, and we needed it right before a 29-weeker was born. We had bought it 1 month before. I was so glad we had it. So there's been a lot of additions and working together, which has been great. The post-call fatigue does kick in. I think that is a barrier to our quality and safety. So we're working 24-hour shifts. Sometimes our weekends are actually 48 hours. Things that we do in the clinic are impacted by our call the night before. So it can definitely be a long 24 hours occasionally. Sometimes we are at lower staffing levels, and we do have high volume visit expectations, but again, we have kind of a pediatric specific population that with our own challenges. So solutions for some of these things would be kind of some scheduling accommodations and working through some of those barriers with call. The youth social worker, I will just support that 100%, and perinatal care coordination support. Having a pediatric trained float pool, or also offering per diem staff options. We've had really qualified, excellent, smart people go off to nursing school or PA school or PT school, and we love them, and they would stay if they could work part-time, but that's just not an option for us the way we have things structured. But that would be a great way to keep people who know the system and we know them and we love them, and have them still as an option to come when we do need help. And then the snow. We have a lot of snow, it turns out. So having a protocol on how to get back and forth so would be helpful. So this is the end of it all. Thanks for your patience with this presentation, probably over time. But things that we're hoping for, and it probably should be more like 2024 and 2025 goals, as some of the things I just mentioned. And then I think in general, we're just hoping for collaboration, and we're really looking forward to this dyadic leadership model and moving forward with how this could look as an innovative healthcare structure. So we have a lot of confidence. We love our kids. We advocate for our kids, and hopefully after this presentation, you will see why that is so important, and you will too. So thank you.
Thank you. Any comments from our board?
I've got a question. You mentioned the word culture, and we've heard that term a lot lately, particularly as we're looking for a new CEO for the hospital. But usually it's learning what our culture is. You talked about building your culture. Would you say it's top down or bottom up, or some combination of the two?
Michelle's the culture queen, and to that.
I don't know that I really like to label it that way necessarily. My take is, I want people to all feel like we're on the same level. If these huddles have made a huge change, the fact that people can come and attend and speak their mind and say, hey, let's try this. And as a leadership team, we're like, yeah, sure, let's try it out. See if it works. If it works, let's do it. and so there's that fear isn't there. You know, there's no fear of their leader, or there's retaliation that's going to happen if they speak up about a problem. And that's something I have worked very hard since I've been here on trying to eradicate, because, you know, when I came, the clinic was not in the greatest state. And so it's been a lot of work on my end, but being present in my clinic, walking around multiple times a day, checking in with people, building those relationships, I think that's a lot of where that culture comes in.
Michelle is approachable, and she is excellent at accountability and following up, and I think that has really changed the trust level in leadership, and that would be what really moved our clinic into what it is today. And so just even if you can't do something, you still follow up and you say why, or maybe you try to figure out, well, how can we make it better even if we can't do the thing that you thought was a good idea. And just being more respectful of each other's time, and also knowing that even though it may not seem important to you, or it may not be as valuable to you, it is valuable to them. So making sure to circle back and address those things has been, and Michelle is amazing at that, and we are just so grateful for her.
Yeah, I've actually attended a couple of the huddles. Michelle's invited me, and it really does feel like an open dialogue, and people are, really open with their communication with the leadership there. And I mean, even to the point where there's usually a little question where they can answer a question of the day or the week, is it?
Yeah, it's bi-weekly, and we usually pull them from our score survey. So, it's just basically to measure happiness. So they have a little happy or a sad face, and whatever the question reads, they can put a happy face in for the day, and then if it was a bad day, they can put a sad face, and they can write a comment on the back if they want to go into more detail.
Is that one of the stickers?
No feeling required.
Nope. Pre-drawn out.
And I think we get to have fun in our clinic, and that makes it fun. Kids are fun. So I think just laughing more, having it be where we do outside of clinic activities. So go to baseball games, we do karaoke, we do things together. And so it brings the humanism back to medicine, where you're not just working alongside somebody grouchily all day. There's, you like that person. You want to be there with them. So.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, as a hospital administrator, I'm proud of you guys, but as a parent who uses your services, I'm very happy with the pediatric clinic.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys very much.
Well, thank you for your
Great
presence.
presentation.
I
Thank
think
you
there
for
might be
coming.
some questions that want to address.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Don't go
wait,
yet.
Yeah, we've got, I think, still questions on the board.
Yeah, well, comment and a question. Comment on the lifetime value and how important that is. Driving in the 4th of July float with Dr. Arth was remarkable because he knew every single person.
Every single person
He's like,
called him
I delivered
out.
you, I delivered you. So your comments on community are really incredible, and to see that firsthand. But my question is actually around health equity. And I'm just going to pick on a specific goal around increased well child exams. Do you experience challenges with different demographics, different groups within community? Are there greater efforts to try and reach into all communities across the community, or?
Yeah, that has been a big part of the care coordination department, and we do have a specific pediatric care coordinator, and that's Missy Purcell, and she's amazing, and she does a great job. And then the perinatal health is really where we capture a lot of patients who maybe live farther away or lower socioeconomic status, maybe are a little more at risk socially, or there's some substance abuse issue, something higher risk. And so with those patients, we work together with social work, but that's really where that behavioral health, youth care coordinator, social worker would really come in to play, as to really follow up and capture. We just don't have the enough of the time for the current staff to really follow up with those patients. So we do lose a lot to just loss to follow up. So, but I don't know the exact numbers. We do try to send out reminders. We have a lot of different events and flyers and things through the school. The community health advocates are great. And so they really help with working together in the community. A lot of our physicians and administrators and people are parents, so that is also helpful. So the word spreads around. But I think in general, we do have about 35% Medi-Cal population. So we make sure everything's bilingual. We have everything, we have translators available at every appointment. So everything is meant to be equitable as much as we can. So
Thank you. Anything to the left of me?
Yeah, go ahead, Mary.
No, that's okay. No, I was just moving
Oh,
back.
I had a couple of questions. What are the shifts that the medical staff works there? The days long, how long are they, and what time to get off?
Are you talking about the physicians or the?
Physicians.
The physicians, so we work on, we do 410s technically, so 32-hour direct patient care hours is our full-time. And so we count a call shift is 24 hours, 8 a.m. to 8 a.m. And then the clinic's open 8 to 5. And so we'll either have an 8 to 4 or 9 to 5 schedule every other day and then have administrative hours after that. And then for the call day, we'll have an extra hour in the morning and 20 minutes at lunch to try to help accommodate those rounding time seeing patients in the hospital and any other procedures that need to be done.
So if you do get a call, then that adds to those hours.
Right, so let's say that, for example, Dr. Vayner today, so he had to be called away from clinic. And so what happens then is those patients on his schedule either be absorbed by other physicians or providers in the clinic. Oftentimes, we're already full all the time. And so it's hard. Sometimes we have to reschedule if we can. Sometimes patients wait. It just kind of depends on the scenario, and then we will try to get them in and double book them or get them back in, but it is challenging to adjust that when you are dealing with a critical patient in the hospital. And so when we're called in overnight, we are 20 minutes away within a 20-minute radius, and so we'll come in and do the resuscitation. We'll stay until the transfer. We'll be here sometimes for 2, 3, 6 hours, depending on the weather. And so helping to coordinate and basically provide NICU care or PICU care until somebody else can arrive.
Yeah, that's what you're talking about when you say that, yeah, that's the rest of the day. That's pretty tiring.
Yeah, coming back at 8 a.m. the next day. I've had where I haven't even gone home. And so I think that's where that post-call clinic day and the accommodations for how we can work our schedules to accommodate if there is an emergency or it was a rough night, that kind of a thing. We're trying to help implement that in a way that makes sense for everyone and makes sense for the department and the hospital system. So I think that's something that we'd really like to look into, especially during respiratory illness season. That's a big one.
On a slightly different topic, do you feel that you have a dyadic relationship within your group?
This is one of the best examples we have of dyad leadership in the organization. We have a number of good ones, but this is one of the best ones we have. These two work really well together.
That's great. Well, you're our role models.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
I'm honored.
Okay, Mary, did you have something? No, okay. Anything from our audience?
Now it's
Red
on.
light. Red light.
I think, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm Megan Shirley. I'm a physician assistant here. I work in primary care. So amazing to hear about your clinic. I knew some about it, but I'm really impressed, and I want my clinic to be like your clinic. So I have a couple questions. First, well, one's just an easy question. I was wrongly under the impression that we didn't admit pediatric patients here. When did that change, or was I always wrong?
Always wrong.
I was always wrong. Okay.
Yeah.
I was under the impression we couldn't admit under 18.
Yeah, so yes, so
Okay.
the hospitalists are adult providers, so they will be admitting only 18 and up.
So there just has to be a pediatric provider available too.
Well, we are always available.
So now you're always available. Great.
Yep, so we don't admit 6 months and under currently, and that's been working on with our education with nursing staff, our supplies. I'm trying to build more of a hospitalist program so that we can keep more of our younger infants here. The volume is lower in general, and so that tends to be something that we need to really get more comfortability with and standardize the process before I would consider us, top-notch organization that I would take my infant here too. So I just want to make sure that everybody is at their best and that they feel comfortable in what they're doing. So, and the nurses are doing amazing. They're really taking on the task, and it's great to see the growth in the last couple of years with all the skills in education. So it's been fun. But
Great. And then I have a second question, maybe more for you, Michelle, on your daily or your biweekly huddles. So that sounds, was it hard to get the permission to host a meeting like that where all staff attended? Do you start the clinic day late on that day? Or are people expected to work OT, and do they get paid for that? Or like, what's kind of the background of how that works?
So we do it every Tuesday. We do it at 12:45. We all talked as a group and decided that that would be the most convenient time. We try to keep them to 15 minutes. So, sometimes people will cut their lunches short, but usually not more than like 10 minutes or so. And there's no requirement for them to be there. So if they are, running behind or they just don't feel like it, we don't, there's no like reprimand. But, I think that there wasn't really like I need a permission to do this. It was more of, after that workshop that we had with Tagria, it was basically like expected, that this is how you're going to change things around here. This is how you're going to move things in the direction that you want. And so everybody bought in. They wanted to be a part of it.
So it's just in the lunch hour then, that one day?
Mm-hmm.
And you find most people choose to come?
Oh, we have a packed hallway in front of my office.
Yeah.
He can attest to that.
Yeah. Great. Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
We have roughly 27 service lines, clinical service lines. Pediatrics is kind of the gold standard of what we want to have at Tahoe Forest, which is why we wanted them to present to the Administrative Council and then also to the Board of Directors and kind of give you guys a sense of what's going on. I think they are a really good example of how a shared dyadic leadership model really works effectively. We'll be bringing together, not all, but most of those 27 service lines in a series of meetings to try to do some cross-pollination and also really try to figure out what are the standards of leadership that we want to embody at Tahoe Forest at the service line level, and then how do we want to communicate effectively in a way that we can kind of spread throughout the organization. So when you hear all the good things that are going on, you think, well, how can we make that happen everywhere else? And that is essentially what we're going to try to do with the service line. So these guys are certainly going to be involved in that, and we're going to be leveraging their expertise. And maybe they'll learn something too from some of the other service lines and just continue to get better, which is certainly the goal. So thank you very much for participating in this. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other comments for our presenters? Well, we really thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we waited for you and it was worth waiting. So thank you again.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Very informative and very thorough.
Yeah.
Appreciate
And
it.
very positive.
Yeah.
And then next is our presentation by Maria Martin on Community Health Index. I want to thank you, Maria, for waiting. I know that it's been an informative meeting, but when you have to present, you'd rather present first than last.
Great. Thank you. So I'm Maria Martin. I'm Director of Community Health and the Quality Incentive Program with our Medi-Cal population. And myself and Megan Shirley, Population Health Medical Director, are going to be presenting on the Community Health Index. And the Community Health Index is how we are, our idea for how we would measure the success of the aspirations of the community peak of the strategic plan. And before we go on, I just want to also acknowledge Lizzie Hennessy. Lizzie Hennessy is our population health data analyst. She is a huge contributor in this project, and she would be with us here today too, but she's on vacation. Okay, so we can... Okay, so this is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about how we came to develop the Community Health Index. We're going to highlight 2 of our 15 metrics, which are going to measure our success. We can talk about the other metrics. There's, the other 13 metrics, but we wanted to really go into detail on 2. And if you have questions about the others, we're prepared to discuss them. And then we'll just target a little bit on what our next steps are going to be.
Okay. So thanks, everyone. So I'm, again, Megan Shirley, and as you all know, about a year ago, I think sometime in 2023, one of the peaks or pillars for our organization, or the kind of strategies, was shifted from growth to community. And so on the left there, you can see one of our peaks now is community, and the winning aspiration is aspire to be an integrated partner in an exceptionally healthy and thriving community. And so in community health, and Maria and her team were kind of tasked with determining, well, how are we going to measure ourselves in this and know that we are making progress, just like we are in our other peaks or pillars. So as you all likely know, each one's got its goal. I think finance is to move from, and Crystal, correct me if I'm wrong, but to move from a triple B minus to an A minus. Okay, nice. And for quality, it's to move from a CMS rating from a 3-star to a 5-star. So we've got pretty discrete objective data on how we want to move from one place to the next, and that's what you need to drive an organization forward. So what will that be for community? How are we going to measure ourselves? So we started to think about that, brainstorm, worked with kind of a team within the system. And so this was kind of the development stage. And so how do you quantify this? How do you quantify being healthy and thriving in a community? It's kind of a broad concept. It's a little tough to wrap your head around. Health can be so many things, not just healthcare. So we thought about that a lot, and we looked for a model or a system or a dashboard or an index that already existed that we could use. That would be great. Like CMS is for quality. Like, what can we use that already exists that's been kind of vetted? So we considered some options here. They're listed. So we looked into blue zones. For those who don't know, a blue zone is an area in the world where people live extraordinary long and healthy lives. And then the concept of blue zones was kind of coined and turned into kind of a business strategy called Blue Zone Project. And that's an organization that is a for-profit organization that helps communities and other industries try and improve their health in a variety of ways. So we kind of looked at Blue Zone. We also looked at what's called the Accountable Communities for Health. That's a program really started by the government, by CMS and others, on a way to kind of group together to kind of look at health with a different mindset and make collaborative relationships. We actually met with one out of West Sacramento, I think. We did a Zoom meeting with them just to hear about their experience. They're typically, to my take home was like very broad organization. They didn't have like a health sector kind of being at the center of those. We looked at the social, so the bottom three there are kind of indexes that you can find online. So social vulnerability index is a CDC index. That's really looking at populations with how risky or how much, how are they going to do if a natural disaster or another type of disaster rolled into that community, and how do the kind of socioeconomic factors set them up for what's going to happen next? So that's one way you could look at it. There's the county health rankings and roadmaps. That's through the University of Wisconsin, I believe. And that anyone can go look online. It's actually a really user-friendly website if you're curious. You can pop on there, put in your zip code or your county, and it's a very easy to read ranking system for counties on lots of different metrics. So that was one thing we looked at. And then Healthy Places was another. So a lot of the struggle with a lot of these county-based ones is they look at one county. As you all know, our service area is multiple counties, multiple states, and so it was really not going to, looking at Placer County and Nevada County or combining them, and then we've got, what about Washoe County? Trying to find a system out there that we could just use was not going to be reflective of the actual health of our community. So after all of this work and looking at all these ideas, really at the end of the day, we decided that we would build our own index of things that were reflective from our community and use data that we already had. So Maria and her team have been collecting data through the Community Health Needs Assessment, which happens every 3 years for about 10 years, I believe you've been doing it.
Since 2011.
And asking, I don't know how many questions, a lot of questions, collecting a lot of data from our community area on these important topics. So we said, let's dig into that, see what we have, and see what we could come up with. So that's kind of how our Community Health Index was born. And so we were able to select 15 markers, which Marie's going to talk about. And this was done kind of in conjunction with Louie and Dr. Evans and a host of other people. All right.
Okay. So this, I know, this we sent ahead of time, so you got a little bit of chance to digest it before we start talking about it. But like Megan said, we decided we wanted to align our metrics with needs that we already knew we had from our community health needs assessment. And what we did is when we picked the metrics for this, we picked a variety of metrics, and some of the metrics we will have more control over as a health system than other metrics. The other metrics are going to require us to, make connections and collaborations with our community partners, and we'll need support for that because a lot of it's not within our direct control. So that's just something to keep in mind. And to measure our success on how we do on this metrics, we're going to be looking at a variety of different data sources. So one source will be patient-level data, like how are we doing with the patients that are coming here? And we'll pull that data out of EPIC. We'll look at our community health needs assessment. So we have baseline data from our needs assessment. We will be completing our next assessment in 2025. And then the one after that will be 2028, and this is a 5-year project, so we'll be using both of those measurement periods to assess our progress as we go, with the ultimate goal of looking at where we are in 2029. And then the third, where we're going to pull some data, is for some specific metrics where we don't typically capture the survey data, especially on youth. So we'll be using data from the California Healthy Kids Survey for some of the youth metrics that we're looking at. So we have the priority areas, or the 5 areas that keep coming up in the community health needs assessment of areas where we have need. And for most of those areas, health, with the exception of health equity, we're looking at our total community population. For the health equity metrics, we are specifically, our target population for that is specifically the socioeconomically disadvantaged population. And the reason why we did that is because there's such a huge difference in those measurements between our randomly surveyed population and our socioeconomically disadvantaged population that we feel we need to work with that population to help bring them closer to the results of the randomly surveyed population. So I'll just kind of talk a little bit about like what we are looking at for each of these areas. So for the health equity measures, we want to increase the percentage of our socioeconomically disadvantaged population that is insured. We want to increase the percentage of that population that has a primary care provider that they can identify. And we want to decrease the percentage that experiences food insecurity. For substance misuse, we're going to be looking at trying to address our adult binge drinking rate, which is very high, and this is a cultural change, and so this is one of those examples where we would be working with a variety of partners in the community on that. Adult smoking, we want to keep our rates low. We want to decrease the rates of youth vaping and youth binge drinking. Chronic disease management is an example of where we took our patient population. So we want to make sure that we're doing the best care for our patients that have a diagnosis of diabetes or hypertension. And so we're going to be looking at the numbers out of EPIC on are we keeping those patients with those diagnoses in control based on their hemoglobin A1C and their blood pressure measures. For mental behavioral health, we're looking at loneliness. And while when we go into the details of this, we rank okay with loneliness. We're doing better than the national average, but when you look at the numbers, you're like, well, we could do better than that. Okay, there's still room for improvement there. We want our community members to feel they have the social and emotional support they need, and we want to improve the metric around youth mental health, which is really the youth that, the percentage of youth that are experiencing sadness and hopelessness to the extent that it's changing their activity. And that Dr. Fiamingo kind of touched on what they're seeing in their patient population around depression too. And then for prevention and wellness, we're looking at increasing mammography rates, increasing colon cancer screening rates, and again, looking at that same metric that we do with our socioeconomically disadvantaged population is increasing the percentage of our community members that can identify their primary care provider. They have a primary care provider and one that they feel comfortable with. And so we have all these different metrics, and what we ended up going to is looking at the Healthy People 2030. So some of you may have heard there's been Healthy People 2000, Healthy People 2010. They do it every 10 years. There are over 300 and something different metrics that they're following, and we found that with the exception of 2 of these metrics, we can align with the Healthy People 2030 targets as our goal. Okay, any questions about this before I go on? Okay, so then the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit, this is like one of the metrics. And so we've created kind of the same structure for each of the metrics so people can digest like what we're trying to do. So this is the metric for the socioeconomically disadvantaged who is currently currently insured. And so our target population socioeconomically disadvantaged in the bars, the one that those colors look really close on this slide, so we're going to have to adjust those. But the one on the far left is the Healthy People 2030 goal. The one next to it is what our randomly surveyed population is for currently insured, and the yellow one is our socioeconomically disadvantaged population. And so our goal is to increase the yellow to get close to what our randomly surveyed population is. So we're at 33% now. Our aspirational goal is to hit 92.4% by 2029. And where we're going to get this data is from our community health needs assessment. And the question is, do you have any kind of health care coverage, including health insurance from an employer or private prepaid plans such as HMOs or government plans such as Medicare, Medicaid, or CHIP? Okay.
Quick question on that. Are there people out there who would be eligible, say, for Medi-Cal, but either don't know it or haven't signed up?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So right now, well, in January, we've expanded Medi-Cal in California. So you do not have to have immigration status, and there was the gap between, I want to say 25 to 55 that were not eligible insurance, and they are now. So we are working actively, our community health advocates, when they come across a patient to find out if they're eligible for Medi-Cal and help them get enrolled. And same with the financial counselors are doing the same thing.
We have a dedicated Medi-Cal enrollment person at Tahoe for us to assist them.
Do they have to contribute to that cost of that Medi-Cal?
For Medi-Cal, no, but you can also, the other option is Covered California.
Right.
And so based on income level, some of those plans, depending on if your income's too high for Medi-Cal, but within the range, the payments are pretty reasonable. So we help with people with that too.
How many patients did we lose in the reapplication process?
There is no good numbers for that. We've tried to work with Partnership, who's our Medi-Cal managed care plan, and they see their enrollments just doing this all over the place. So it's like all of a sudden they lose it and they get it back, and they lose it and get it back. So it's hard to tell how many who were existing truly didn't qualify anymore, period. And they're trying to pull their own numbers together, and a lot of those folks are assigned to us as the service area that we would serve those patients. So I don't have concrete numbers for you. It's pretty difficult to put our finger on.
Okay, so we'll move on to look at one other metric, and this is metric number 13, which is under prevention and wellness. We just picked these kind of randomly, so if there's other particular metrics you want to hear about more when we're finished, we're happy to go over those. This is for mammography, so breast cancer screening for women. And so our target population to look at this metric are women between the ages of 40 and 74 who live in the primary service area of Tahoe Forest. This mimics the U.S. Preventative Task Force recommendation for when you should be getting mammography. And we really wanted to make sure we were targeting people who live here as full-time residents and aren't just stopping through, seeing urgent care for a sore throat. We want to make sure the data was appropriate. So we pulled data from Epic, and our helpers with that made sure to run the reports in a way that we really tried to capture people who live here regularly and receive health care here regularly. So as you can see, our percentage when we pulled that recently was just about 60%. It was 58% of women. And the Healthy People target for 2030 is 80%. Healthy People baseline right now is 75%. So like Healthy People now is 75 and they want to get to 80, and we're at 60 and we want to get to 80. So that'll be some work cut out for us. And this is an area where, we really think it'll be we're not getting too much into how we're going to do this tonight, but, some of this is going to require internal work within our own health system. We do mammographies, right? But also partnering with our community members to make sure people understand who needs a mammography, how do you get a mammography, when is it covered, right? And doing the education pieces. So that is a bit about this metric. Any particular questions on this one?
Do you have a number for the SED in this category?
We have, so there's two pieces of data here. This is pulled from Epic, and we can disaggregate it by insurance class. The other number, which I've presented to in the past, was from our needs assessment. And when the question on the original community health needs assessment is, have you ever had a mammogram? And it was a very different. Most 90% of our randomly surveyed population had a mammogram, and in our socioeconomically disadvantaged, it was very low. I'm going to guess like around 50 or 40% had ever had one. So that might be what you were thinking of, Mary. And then what we're going to do for the next needs assessment is we're changing the mammogram question to ask, how long has it been since your last mammogram? So we can align what we get from our community data with closer to what we're pulling out of Epic.
Thank you.
And the healthy people target is that you should have a mammogram every 2 years. So that's kind of the interval that we really are looking at moving forward. And that matches with kind of these nationwide recommendations. Yeah.
I had the similar question, but really applied to all. I mean, there are three metrics dedicated under health equity for the SED population, but I would imagine the percentages for the other 12 are influenced heavily by that population as well.
Yes. We could look at the data and see and disaggregate it and see how we're doing with our randomly surveyed and our SED population. And we can do that from the needs assessment. So we look at it all together, and then we can take it apart and look at it. But we made the specific equity goals on those three metrics for that population.
Right, which makes sense. But I'm thinking of, when we think of the other 12, and we think of areas for improvement.
Right.
On the healthy and wealthy population, there might not be any services we can offer. They're doing great.
Right.
So we might find that a lot of our services need to tailor to certain demographics.
Yeah.
That'll increase the overall percentage.
Yeah, I think as we start prioritizing which metrics we're going to focus on first and looking into where are the true problems? Like, where does it lie? Does it lie in the fact that they're uninsured, or they can't get to the appointment, or where's the barrier? Some of that stuff with equity is definitely going to come up that we can focus on, I think.
And then the other thing I would add is that we were surprised to find for mammography that in our total population, we were that low. We thought we would be better, and that we would be looking at trying to pull out the population in need. So since we have such a way to go with our random population, or our total patient population, by doing things that would improve mammography for the total patient population, we will also be bringing along the SED population with us. But we might have some targeted interventions for them as well.
Okay. This is me, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about next steps. So where we go from here. So as Maria mentioned, these are really ultimately 5-year goals, 5-year aspirations. And so we are aspiring to meet 10 of these metrics by June 30, 2029, which is just about 5 years from now. So that's a pretty lofty goal, I think, if you look at how far we have to go in each of them, but that's what we're aiming for. I think it's just noting that currently we do meet 3 of them already, and so those 3 are adult smoking. So we're already kind of meeting the healthy people goals for adult smoking, for people who have hypertension and are in control, and also for our rates of loneliness. So we're already 3 up, and we've got 7 to go. We realize we won't be able to tackle all the others of these at once. They're going to require a lot of help and input from internal and external to our organization to move the mark on some of these, particularly some that are less in our control. And so we are going to need to partner, and we're going to need to get help, and we're also really going to need to prioritize how we attack these. And that's kind of our next step that we'll be working with Louie and Dr. Evans and others on kind of doing what's called a effort impact matrix or grid to determine, which of these are going to require how much input to see the needle move, and that will help us understand where we want to focus first. I think the other thing we really realize in the effort of needing help is this is really going to require cross-sector collaboration, and that's really the goal of this community peak. Is it's not just us, it's not just our people here in our team. It's going to be reaching out, asking for ideas, asking for partners, and I think getting people's voice and input, the outside organizations from the get-go, is going to be really valuable in having them feel integrated. So we want to make sure we're keeping that in mind as we move forward. We will be sharing this concept of the Community Health Index more broadly internally. So I think we're sharing it next week with the directors and managers. We did share it with AC a couple weeks ago, and then we'll be sharing it with all staff kind of as we are able to. And then eventually sharing it more broadly with the community. We don't have a discrete plan for that yet. And then once that's happened and we've identified which initiatives we want to prioritize, really drilling a bit more down into where are the gaps and what should we focus on and who can help us do that and who's passionate about this, right? Let's get people involved who are passionate about these topics and have good ideas.
What are you going to do to keep the public informed? Specific Moonshine Inc. articles or Sierra Sun?
Yeah,
or
I mean, I'll let Maria speak to this.
mailings or?
The ultimate goal is that at some point we can have like a dashboard, a public-facing dashboard that would be a place for people to look and see the index, see what we're watching, see how we're moving. Are we doing better? Are we doing worse? What are we focusing on? So that would be one opportunity, but that's obviously a little further down the road.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, getting the word out to our community partners, like through the Community Collaborative, like starting with the different social service agencies that we would be looking at to help us to move this. And it could be articles, it could be posts that we do. We could use social media. We won't impact the Brown Act.
You guys are free.
We're okay. But,
And I won't respond. We won't respond to it.
Post on
yeah, you can't like it or give us a smiley face.
No smiley face.
But what I think the community would appreciate is to know that we're making efforts. Yeah. And they want to know like what we're doing as we go. And so that's like the intention of this public-facing dashboard. Yeah, it'll have, this is where we are now, this is where we want to be, but there would be also information like right now we've changed these things, or right now we've implemented whatever. And that's the kind of stuff we want to get out to the community as we start doing things. Because some things are going to work and some things aren't, but I think when people see that the effort's being put towards it, that really helps the public perception.
I'm not sure if you're aware of the fact, because we're going to talk about it at the very end, but this is a component in the CEO incentive compensation, is this healthy people, the attainment of, ultimately, of the 5-year aspiration. But the 1-year goal of hitting 5 of them is something that we're going to hopefully talk about and approve, maybe.
As part of a requirement.
As part of the incentive compensation package.
Yeah, I think we wanted to align the incentives with the CEO's goals and the organization, right, in terms of the 5 peaks. So, clearly it's an aspiration. We have to meet 2 additional for this 1-year annual goal. But the team that supports both Megan and Maria are a very, very impressive team. And so I think it's these are big, lofty goals, but I think we've got the right team here at Tahoe Forest Health System and the right support with leadership. So I look forward to the work that they do this year and throughout the measurement period over the next 4 years.
So I just had one more last line here, and then I think we're about ready to wrap up and we can do more questions. But we also are really trying to make sure that we move forward with this new initiative in alignment with kind of the management systems approach that the rest of the health system is beginning to embrace and learn about. And so being really thoughtful about how we move forward in a way that makes sense for the whole team and that we're getting the right input. So we've had to slow down a little bit. We've been told to slow down a little, rethink that rather than start doing, right, which I think is fine. And that will hopefully make sure, help us have success in the long run, kind of more guarantee of having that success and having everyone who works at Tahoe Forest understand how we're moving forward with this. What does it look like? And what is that process? So.
And I think it's important for them to know the district's going beyond the four walls of our hospital building, that we are thinking about the whole community's health.
It was a real risk of trying to boil the ocean here. I think there was a lot of discussion about what course is important in terms of the community's health needs, but also what can we manage and what kind of timeline really we needed to look at in terms of being successful, because ultimately that's the goal. It's not really a talking point. It's actually being successful at this over the next 5 years.
Any comments from our audience? Oh, one more.
Yes, last question. Absolutely appreciate the amount of work this will require. Do you believe that the team is appropriately resourced from people, from dollars?
We have confidence that we can move the numbers, but to achieve the Healthy People 2030 goals, I think we would probably need some more support.
Thank you.
I would agree, and Maria's more in her director role, familiar with finances and budgeting and whatnot, but I think that we will need lots of person power and potentially financial power to move these things forward.
Thanks.
Uh-oh, there goes the AAA minus.
Okay.
Yeah, I know.
Which do you want, a grade, or do you want to have real behavior changes in our healthy population? Okay, any other comments from?
No, I was going to say we could make the changes, but then, we may not be in existence to see the future of those changes. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. There's a reality you can have both, right?
Yeah.
It's balance.
Yeah.
There's a balance, of course, but there's a reality you can have both.
Well, there's philanthropy. There's finding efficiencies in the organization. There's to the discussion. It's going to take everyone.
Right.
It doesn't fall on us.
Yeah. But we can support.
Thank you again, Maria, and thank you, Dr. Ganong, for the work that you've done and the work that you will be doing.
You can just call me PA Shirley.
PA.
Or Megan.
Okay, PA Shirley.
And my sister.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was really good.
Okay.
Good stuff.
So many great presentations tonight, but we have to move on. And the next we have is 17.1, and Crystal Felix will present the resolution on 2024, Resolution 4 for the assessed value for fiscal year 24-25.
So I'm trying to recall, pretty sure, Bob, you've gone through this one time, right? So we all have some history here now, so
Right.
hopefully this goes a little bit smoother. So
I just look forward to the discussion between you and Dale. That's what I look forward to every year. Yeah.
you know what?
No, I've given up.
Okay.
It might even be Mary this time after Finance Committee, so we'll see.
Yeah.
All right, so obviously since 2007, when the general obligation bond was voted on by the community and passed, we have had to do this work every year to establish the rate per 100,000 assessed value to collect enough in property tax dollars to cover the debt service requirement of the general obligation bonds. In your packet, I've given you some history along the lines of where we've been, what assessed values have done, even going through the housing crash and the additional dollars the district put forth to help to try to soften the blow of the rate that we needed to collect. But as of today, for our 24-25 debt service payments on these GO bonds, based upon the assessed values provided to us from the counties, this becomes a mathematical equation. There's the only opinion in this is really how much of the existing reserves from the previous year gets utilized this year. So historically, I have advised about 75% use of those reserves. And I actually changed my opinion this year for a couple of reasons. There is more secured assessed values provided by the counties this year. Those secured values are under the teeter plan. So we are not at risk for default of payment on those, that component of the property taxes they collect. The part we become at risk on is the unsecured component, which went down. So the unsecured values went down, and we already reserved for that at 6%. So kind of looking at that shift, also looking at the historical usage of the reserve and the leftover. Last year, when I brought this to you, we had over $900,000 available in reserve. We're sitting here again today with over $900,000 in reserve. So we utilized, and now we're back to $900,000. So I feel a little more comfortable about using a little more of that reserve. Obviously, there's still unknowns. People can, we can have new construction that gets completed and might be able to add to the assessed property rolls. We could have organizations like ourselves who buy property and it becomes tax exempt. So there's still some ebbs and flows that could occur, but I don't feel like that would be significant enough to not collect enough in the way of property tax revenues using an 85% reserve. Could there be something unpredictable like another housing crash that none of us see coming? Of course. But in the end, I kind of settled on utilizing a little bit more reserve this year at 85%. A few board members might want to have dialogue around that, and that's fine. This is just a recommendation. I really have you could use all of it if you want, or you can use none of it. It's really up to the board to determine. I am just making a recommendation. So at this point, utilizing an 85% of the reserve balance, I would suggest setting the rate at $15.31 per 100,000 of assessed value, and that is using 85% of the available reserves. There's calculations in your packet that would show you what it would look like if you used all of it, none of it, and then anything from 25, 50, 75, and 85. And of course, my recommendation was 85. Just to refresh everyone's memory, back in the day when we were seeing double-digit increases in our assessed value, when we went to the taxpayers to try to pass this bond, we had said, we think the maximum rate per 100,000 will be $18.76. If we did not use any of our reserves at all, we would still only be at $17.96 per 100,000. So still below that $18 threshold that we told the community about. So before you today is our resolution that I was be seeking your approval on to set the rate at $15.31. But there might be argument for 75% usage at which would be $15.62 instead. And I did draft a secondary resolution just in case.
Just in case.
Just in case. So at this point, I'm going to leave it open to you guys for questions, discussion, whatever you would like to do.
I have a question. So we're not paying down principal with the use of the reserve account, is that correct?
No, we absolutely would. It's principal and interest that it would be paying.
But if we use more reserve, are we paying down more principal?
No. It's just we are collecting less from the current taxpayers that are going to be making their property tax payments in the future by using collections we've already received. We can only use this reserve for payment on the general obligation bonds.
Right.
It cannot be utilized for anything else.
But the amount that we pay, Bob, for the bond payments remains the same.
Yes. No matter what, we have a debt requirement of $5,747,431. So somehow we have to make that payment. It can either come entirely from the next round of property taxes the counties will collect, or it can be a portion of that plus our reserves.
So what we're doing is using the reserves and reducing the amount the taxpayers are having to pay.
That they would see on their tax roll coming up.
Okay, that's just what I wanted to clarify. So there isn't any benefit in paying additional, principal down, because we don't have the resources to do that. We're
Nor
just
can we.
making our
Can't do it.
yearly payment, which is fixed, and then we determine between the reserves and the tax rate, the payment of the 5 million, basically.
Yes, so we need to collect enough future property tax dollars to make the debt service payment. And
When-
some of that,
Yeah, when added to our reserve.
right, and some of that we've already collected that is available to utilize.
Right, Bob, also, you got to understand, we have saved the taxpayers millions of dollars by refinancing these bonds over the three tranches, I guess you would call it.
And never extended the maturity schedule.
And never
at all.
extended the maturity date, exactly. So the ultimate price that the taxpayers pay is going to be far less than what it was when we started.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Definitely was.
So Crystal has alluded to the fact that there might be some discussion around this. It's so funny because at one point in time, I was all for using 100% of the reserves, they paid it, let's use it, let's, not hold on to any of it, it's the people's money and all of that. So bit by bit, Crystal dragged me across the line and got me to 75%.
And now you're more.
And now you're upping it to 85%. And I'm saying this is no fair. And the reason that I was wanting to see it remain at 75% is my concern around the valuation of property going forward in this area. I think that for reasons like we talked about with Elena the other day from Chandler, I think we're going into a period around real estate that's going to be a period of real stagflation, and I just don't see the property values rising as quickly as have been projected. And so I'd feel more comfortable at the 75% level. That's my spiel.
And you have something drafted for the 75%?
Of course.
Yeah.
I saw it coming.
And and Mary, I'm with you there too. So let me say this. When we had this big dip in property values, we were still fairly new in this bond repayment thing. Yeah, we were 3 or 4 years into it?
10 years in.
Yeah, I can see it right here. We were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years into it when property values went way down. And to soften the blow to the public, we took money out of our revenue accounts just to make up some difference there. I wouldn't want to do that again.
Well, let me stress, we do not have any obligation to do that.
No, I know we don't.
That was a decision the board made.
It was
every year, the district has the right to set the rate to fully cover the debt service payment, no matter what assessed values do.
Right.
So that is part of the general obligation bond.
So the thing you got to understand too is that if we keep a little more money in the reserve account, it's the public's money. It's eventually going to be spent.
Right.
It has to be.
It's just, the only people that are going to lose are the few residents who sell their homes and move out of the area because they paid a little extra into that account. But it has no other effect on all of us who are seeing it to the end.
I do want to clarify that there is no intent of setting the rate to collect extra. So we can only do the calculation based upon the values the county gives to us. And if that happens to materialize more in the end with what happens in the market, so be it, and that's what causes the reserve. But there is no intention to ever set the rate higher than necessary to create a reserve, and I want to make that clear.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That's totally understood.
Just for context, can I do my crude math out loud? We're talking about, this is value per 100,000 of a property.
Assessed value.
Correct. So if you
So the
have
difference
a-
between 85 and 75 is 30 cents. So on $1 million property, we're talking $3.
Yeah.
If we went to 75 versus 85.
Why do you think I have no heartburn over
Yeah.
whether you go to 75?
It's so easy for us.
Yeah. Yeah, it's,
Just wanted to make sure my numbers
yeah,
were
exactly.
right.
Yeah, we're,
Get your decimal points in the right places.
yeah. Yeah, if the decimal point stays in the right place, yes. Yeah.
So, just one clarification question. So going forward, if the real estate property valuations go down, it doesn't make any difference because we would have to raise the rate to pay back that bond, pro rata, whatever it takes to pay the bond payment for that year, correct?
We are obligated to make in this case, this $5 million debt service payment no matter what.
Right.
So
But Bob, you're on the right track.
If
Yeah,
the-
we
if
still
the-
have to collect that amount of money.
Correct.
Yeah,
Right,
It's
we
just,
have to charge more if the valuations go down.
it's just that it was some people heartburn to see the dollars per 100,000 go way up.
We cannot raise a rate in a future year to make up the previous year. We cannot.
Yeah, so.
So if for some reason we used 100% reserve and the amount the counties collected and came back to us fell short of our $5 million for some reason, that's very rare. If that happened, we are still obligated to come up with the dollars to make that debt service payment and cannot go to the next period to try to recoup that.
Yeah.
So that's why we keep the reserve.
Yeah.
Part of why I've always recommended keeping the reserve, yes.
We have to take the money from operations.
Yeah.
All right, well, okay.
It-
I think I'm ready to vote.
Okay.
Well, before we vote, does anybody want to make any other comment about the budget? The property tax?
Tax rate, yeah.
And nobody from our audience? Okay, so if someone's ready to make a motion to set the rate?
I think,
I would make the motion to set the reserves at 75%.
Utilize
second.
this.
Utilize 75%.
Yeah, I was gonna say-
Utilize, thank you.
Yeah.
Utilize 75% of the reserves and apply that towards our general obligations.
So you would be making a motion to set the rate at $15.62 per 100,000 instead of the recommended brought forward to you today of the $15.31.
That would be my motion.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, all in favor of setting the rate at?
$15.62 per 100,000.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? So you've got it, no heartburn to go along with it.
Nope, no heartburn.
heartburn.
The only heartburn is if we don't get the resolution signed, because I have to get this to the counties pretty quick, so.
So,
Yeah,
do you have it?
Did you make a second copy?
Martina's on the ball.
I did, I drafted
Oh,
it.
she did.
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah.
She made two of them.
Oh, good.
One for you to go.
You were prepped, okay.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
so thank you so
Thank
much
you
for
very much.
going.
Thank you, Crystal.
Hopefully it wasn't as painful it's been in past years.
Yeah.
Our next item is 17.2, the second reading of the proposed revisions to the Tahoe Forest Board of Directors bylaws. The Governance Committee reviewed them. We had legal counsel reviewing them, and there were some just editorial changes, word spellings, but the one thing that we did change was the standing committees, that they don't have to be approved in a resolution annually with the charters. We just changed the words to the standing committees and their charters would be reaffirmed annually. So we don't have to have a resolution to do it.
Yeah.
And we would do that at the end of the year.
That's on page 8.
Okay. So does anybody have any questions about the resolution, about the changes in the bylaws? Because it's a simple, it was an antiquated way of saying it, and that we don't do resolutions on the committees, and we haven't since, I can't remember when.
I did have some just general comments, questions. Should we submit those for review, walk through them now? Like, for example, and maybe they're just my misunderstanding, but for Section 1 election, it says should be elected for 4-year terms, but don't we do 4-year and 2-year?
We only do, they're really for 4 years.
2-year would be like if somebody
You
had
are
a
appointed.
vacancy and came in mid.
Yeah, the 2 years only because there was a vacancy that occurred in the first half of a 4-year term.
Okay.
Therefore, you can only do it for a 2-year. That's just pursuant to the Elections Code. But under the Local Healthcare District Act, the terms of directors are 4 years normally.
Okay.
You got some yellow marks there you want to?
I do, yeah, they're not critical, I'm just on.
Because if we make any more additions, then we pull it, and we have to have it posted for another month.
I think I have to post it twice.
No, this would have been what,
This is our,
this would
is
be
our
our
second
first posting, and then we'd have to do it again.
Right, but I'm just saying, this has to be posted twice. Now, this is our second posting, so.
The only, I guess it's just a clarifying question I have there on Section 7. The chief of the medical staff shall be appointed as a special representative to the board and shall attend all meetings.
And I think that comes under the medical staff part of the bylaws, that they do that.
You gotta come
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
The chief of staff comes to
Chief of staff
the
is
meetings
correct.
for the medical staff consent calendar and the credentialing.
Okay.
Okay, so if there are no further additions or corrections, can I have a motion to approve the Board of Directors bylaws as presented?
I'll move to approve the bylaws as presented.
A second, please?
Second?
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded to approve the Board of Directors bylaws as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? So we have those approved for the next 2 years, or if something else happens to any of the amendments or parts of it, we can always relook at it. Okay, then we'll go into 17.3, and these are the CEO incentive compensation criteria. And Mary, are you going to do those, please?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Alice. Yes, so this time of change seems like a good time to revisit the incentive. It seemed like a good time to revisit the incentive compensation and how we went about it. We've always been trying to find a better way to challenge ourselves and to measure the things that we think are important. And so in May, the CEO Compensation Committee met, and as was reported at that time, we philosophically decided that what we would try to do is to align the incentive compensation goals with the Vizient 5-year aspirations and the 1-year goals, and sort of see if we can't keep those things in alignment, and then see how that works and move on. I think it's important to note that in no way are these things that we're going to talk about tonight the only things that we measure. We measure so many things, but these are simply the metrics that go into the incentive compensation. So what I'm going to do is try to lay these out for you in a way that talks about what it is that we're trying to accomplish, and what the 5-year winning aspiration is, or what our actual 5-year goal will be, and then what the 1-year, the fiscal year 24-25 goal is. So starting with finance, of course, this is the one where we're going to not be able to put a number to it, but But anyway, what we decided to do is to move away from the actual budget and rather look at our overarching goal of improving our investment rating from a BBB- to an A-. And toward that end, we decided that we were going to use days of cash on hand as our measurement. And we liked using the days of cash on hand because it took into consideration charges, collections, expenses, capital, and kind of pulled it all together into one thing. So the one-year goal is to end the fiscal year 24-25 with the same number of days of cash on hand that we began the year. But because we haven't gotten to the audited numbers yet, we really don't have a solid days of cash on hand as of the end of 23-24. So we don't know what that number is to be able to say this is what it's going to be at the end of 25. But that will be available at the pre-audit or at the conclusion of the audit. So this is sort of an incomplete category, but it should be ready for completion within a month or so.
So, could I ask you a question of
You
that?
absolutely can, and Crystal will answer it.
Yeah, Crystal will answer it. Yeah. It seems to me that this might be an unfair measure to any CEO if the board elects to do some significant construction. Build that parking lot we hope to build someday and use funds from our reserves to pay for it. It lowers our days cash on hand, but our net assets could go up significantly in that year too. Why isn't it tied more to an increase in net assets as opposed to just cash?
I told you Crystal would answer it.
So I'm going to take you back to the budget package, the future forecasts, and the 9 metrics that really defined a bond rating, which is what we compare ourselves to. Okay. And I will tell you, in the times I've gone through reviews with Standard & Poor's when it was necessary for our revenue bonds, cash is king. That is one of the first and foremost metrics they look at. So out of all the metrics that were most critical that we thought we wanted to start with would be days cash on hand. It doesn't disregard the other 8, and those will have to come into play at some point, which is the one you're speaking to is one of the 9. But the critical one is the days cash on hand. Now, if the board chooses to approve a project outside the scope of the budget that we didn't plan for, then I would suggest the board also make a modification to the goal that takes that into consideration. Because I think it would be unfair to set a target and then change the rules on a person.
Yeah,
So
I wouldn't want to incentivize the CEO to say, oh, I don't want to spend that money because it's going to affect my bonus.
well, you
And
just
make a
gave a directive to spend it. So
I know.
yeah,
I
with
understand.
one decision, you must modify the other in fairness. But that's why days cash on hand got picked, is because it is one of the strongest metrics to meet.
So recognizing that we could modify this as a board, and of course, we all know that, we can change our mind along the route anyway, so, but I would want to be in a position to make
Yeah,
sure
we
that.
have to have a reason to modify it.
Correct.
Yeah.
For me, that is unforeseen circumstances, or just the board feels like we need to redirect something. If suddenly we magically had a 3-story parking structure available to us that we wanted to purchase, of course, the board has the prerogative to make that decision, but to try to hold us to the same cash level would not be realistic. So unless you want me seeking debt, and then that would, then we have other ratios that get wacky when we start doing that.
To some degree, you as a board have already recognized that there is going to be a major investment in capital infrastructure with both the Rite Aid project and the gateway project. So that is why it's being recommended that we just, instead of increasing cash, that we stay at the same level as where we end this fiscal year. So in some degree, you have recognized that investment.
Let me clarify. Keeping days cash on hand does not keep the cash at the same level because our expenses due to inflation go up. So the amount of cash we actually have to have in the bank with higher expenses per day actually requires us to actually save additional money to still get that same day's cash on hand because it's a calculation. We didn't say keep the bank account at the same amount. We said keep days cash on hand at the same amount.
Right. And isn't it assumed too that, yeah, stay right there. Isn't it assumed too that with inflation, S&P, is it S&P we use? I forget.
Yeah, I mean, we've historically used S&P and Moody's. They've both, depending on.
But S&P, if the value of cash, in effect, goes down, they will raise or they'll change their benchmarking to accomplish the AAA or whatever.
Yeah, you're getting into kind of a more complication zone that I don't think really affects what you're trying to discuss today.
Yeah.
And we can go to coffee sometime, Dale, and we'll talk about that.
Okay.
That's legal.
That's legal, yeah.
Thank you.
Joy is not going to vaporize you.
Only one of you.
Okay, can we move on to the next criterion?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm
So
sorry.
the next criterion, if you're following along on page 193, is service and access. And this is actually broken down into 3 different subcategories. Again, our overarching goal is to deliver timely, outstanding patient and family experience. But our first goal in all of that is to, this is a 5-year aspiration, to increase the top box composite Press Ganey patient satisfaction from 95.25 to 96. Number 2 is to increase the market share from the 53rd to the 56%. And number 3 is to improve the third next available appointment for our patients. Okay, so those are the 5-year goals. The 1-year goal in the same respective order is to, this year, to meet or exceed an average of 95.55 on the Press Ganey satisfaction survey. Number 2 is to increase surgical procedures by 8%. And number 3 is to lower the primary care third next available appointment days to less than 10% for new patients. I'm sorry, to less than 10 days, I'm sorry, for new patients and less than 20 days for existing patients. Now, I was a little startled by the disparity between the existing and the new patients. And Scott explained to me that that has to do with the fact that when we bring in new physicians, that opens up the availability, obviously, and that's why actually right now, I think the last 3-month average was something like 4 days for new patients. And I think it's 34 for existing patients?
Yeah, so the last 3 months, new patient average was 5 days, and established patient was 34.5.
So this is quite an improvement for the existing patients, and then still a very low number for the new patients. So this is what's being proposed for the coming year. Are there any questions about that? No?
Well, did you just say it's currently 10 days or 5 days?
Yes.
Yeah, the last 3 months of data provided a measurement of 5 days for new patients.
But we're setting a goal of 10 days?
Well, that's because the new,
Yeah, in this case, the last 3 months
Doesn't look like a
shows-
goal if it's already being met, though.
In this case, the last 3 months of data shows 5 days. I do think that there's been significant improvement in those 3 months of that data set. I think, in terms of setting it lower than 5, if we were to look at that 5 and maybe say 2 days, I'm not sure if we could meet that expectation each and every time, right? It wouldn't be sustainable as our newer providers start to build panels. And that's really what we're building into this, is we are expecting new primary care providers to join our team, but they will build panels, and then they will have, to, of course, meet the needs of their established patients also. So that's kind of built into that metric.
I got the feeling that this is sort of an aberrant number, the present day number, because of all the new physicians that we've brought on. And so, as Louis is saying,
But it gets to a bigger question I'm going to have. If the intent is to approve this tonight, I'm going to be challenged by that.
Okay.
Even going back to the finance metric, are we measuring that on like a specific day? There will be a day's cash on hand? Is it a running average across the 12 months? Because if it's a single day, it can be manipulated in any number of ways, both unforeseen expenses or unforeseen payments. So I just don't have enough clarity on how we're going to measure it.
End of the fiscal year audit is what it would be.
But is it based on a specific point in time?
End of the fiscal year, June 30th.
So on June 30th, if we have that, but if on June 24th we didn't,
Doesn't matter,
it would,
did you end the year?
it would make the metric.
well, but we have to pick a day.
Yeah, we got to pick a
I
day.
will say, the cash flow provided to you shows the ups and downs that occurs during the year, and there will be times we're going to be below that metric. But based upon the flow of our business, the goal is to be back based upon that point by the end of the fiscal year. There's no way to sustain every day the same days cash on hand number or higher. Otherwise, we won't be doing expenditures to do this, that will get us this. So it's kind of that give and take, and the goal is to get where we want to be by the end of the year. I see where you're coming from manipulation. Could I, for the last 45 days, not pay bills? Of course I could. But I think a few other people would have some problems with that.
That's why I think it's so important in setting metrics. That's where so many, when you see, sales metrics taken completely out of context of this document, you see so many people trying to get that deal in the last 5 days of the year to make the goal, but they do cause problems down the road.
Yeah.
Well, we get that
Because they
from our
try to hit
vendors all
that.
the time.
Yeah.
This deal expires on December
Yeah.
31st.
So that's where I think, being very careful on how these are set. And I'm picking on it, but we set a 10-day goal for something that's 5 days. Are we measuring that on the last, at what point, how are we measuring that then? Are we measuring it, is that the average over the year?
I think that's an average over the year, if I recall correctly, and it just happens to be the last 3 months we're good, but the next 3 months could be
But that's why it's not
21
spelled out
days.
here, is like how we're going to measure that. So if it is an average over the year, then that,
Do you want to add that kind of language, I guess is what I'm asking you? So this is the
I
metric
just need that level
on
of
average over the
understanding
year?
before.
Right.
I'm less concerned about maybe what it says specifically here, as long as I have the understanding of how it's going to be
Now, it was
measured.
Scott who came up with this number, and I wasn't in part of that conversation with Scott. Brian, Louis, do you know when he said this, what the intent was behind that number?
I don't know if it was to average out, certainly not over the entire year.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Right.
I would guess about 30 days would be about the right
So-
amount of time to average it. It shouldn't be a single day number though.
No, but so it would be the last 30 days of the fiscal year?
Yeah, that would be what I would.
Is that acceptable to you, Michael?
It's a tough one because.
It's challenging, because what if it was terrible the other 11
Right,
months?
right.
And the system is game to make those.
We will, we'll get interim reports. We'll know if we're headed in the right direction. This isn't going to all of a sudden come to us at the very end of the year.
I just pulled the minutes from the last compensation meeting, and the committee discussed using the last 2 quarters of the fiscal year to complete the measurement.
Whoa, thank you.
Okay.
Does that help you?
How about the last quarter?
What the minutes read.
We have to have a direct,
Well, I think this maybe gets to the process of it's, because it doesn't apply to just this. So many times, like this is the first time, I saw it in the pre-read, and maybe I could have raised comments then, but we haven't had an opportunity to openly discuss what this is.
Okay.
So it's either accept the recommendation, and this goes for quality, goes for all of our committees.
Sure.
So.
I think that 10 days is more meaningful in terms of patient experience. If a patient can get in within 10 days, they're generally going to be very happy with us. And so the fact that we're achieving it right now is good, but it's going to be very difficult for us to maintain a 10-day number sustainably over the long term. So I think it's still a meaningful target for the system. Because, if you could bring in a new doctor tomorrow who has total, like a lot of bandwidth, and it'll be 0 days until that doctor fills up. So, but we want to do that. We want to do that regularly so that we can keep adding capacity and keep this number under control. I think an average of 10 for either a month or 1 quarter makes sense to me.
I noticed the announcement that Scott Samuelson is back in the Moonshine Inc. or Sierra Sun, I guess it was. It said he's accepting new patients.
For now.
Yeah.
For now.
I bet he fills up quick though.
It's going to get snapped up. But we want to keep doing that to the extent we possibly can to meet the need of the community.
Yeah.
So that's why I think the number makes sense.
Yeah, I looked at some part of the report and it says we have basically 7 new doctors coming in as of September or something in that range. So we definitely have new physicians available. But
So that's the reason behind it. We need to find
it seems to me that's a
number
fabulous target number, and I think, maybe the question is what's a fair way to measure it, but as far as a target number, I think it makes sense, and maybe using a quarter or something like that. But if we can get new patients into this hospital to get a primary care physician visit within 10 days, I think that's pretty outstanding. And for the others,
So 20 days.
yeah, 20 days.
20
Pretty
days
good.
for an existing.
I
Certainly it's-
Yeah, most of my questions are more on how are we measuring, not necessarily, hey, if I'm a new patient, I can get in 10 days, or my third next is 10 days, I'm happy with that. But as we've just identified, this quarter, maybe it's an aberration, but we're exceeding that goal. And it gets to the bigger question I have, and this is why I think it maybe is a bigger conversation, is what's the job and what's incentive comp? So, I mean, to me, hitting the budget, that's the job.
Right.
Like, if you don't hit that, your job's at risk, not you get incentivized for it. So that these goals should be stretch goals, not the job.
Have we not been saying that, Mary?
Yes.
And so are they? Maybe they are.
And this will be interesting to see, how far Vizient has stretched the goals. And we don't really know that until we experience it. Again, these were the goals that were set out by Vizient, essentially.
One I absolutely think, I think I'm coming off maybe a little negative or interrogation, but this is absolutely in the right direction though, as far as, because we have been talking about this for years. And I think the distribution of it across, higher weighting to all 5 peaks, not just, I think when I first came on 4 years ago, finance was like 70%.
Oh, it was higher than that. It was 80, I think.
Okay. So absolutely heading in the right direction. I just have some questions. And like on people, we talk about physicians, very important people, but we have 1,300 people.
Right. And they will be reflected in the next year.
Right. So this year we actually did a physician survey, and so that's how we know we can show this measurement at the end of the fiscal year. I would expect that next year, if the board desires, that they could then kind of flip-flop into the general employee survey and use a metric from that survey in support of a CEO incentive comp.
So the thought is that every year we would revise this to reflect
this is just
the
for
areas
this
of
year.
importance.
This is just ending June of '25.
I'm standing up because my Apple Watch says it's required. 5 hours on my rear end is my maximum.
Right.
I guess my question then on the, sticking on the people one is, so we'll think about medical staff every other year, and everyone else will think about on the off years? Or do we need different metrics to really understand we're advancing all people every year?
Right. So the way this is set up to work with regard to people, it is, the 5-year aspiration is to increase the medical staff satisfaction from the 60th to the 75th percentile, and to increase the non-medical staff satisfaction from the 92nd percentile. So it's going to be an every other year thing.
Mm-hmm. This is one of the only objective ways we know how to kind of measure the, what's happening here in the health system in terms of alignment or engagement. Obviously, there's a lot of subjective ways, and we could clearly look at that, but, ultimately, this is a survey process.
For example, and I've referenced this in the past, the Lown Hospital Index on social responsibility, pay equity, where we rank number 22 out of 22 of critical access hospitals in the state, 825 out of 896. Pay equity measures the difference in compensation of hospital execs to healthcare workers without advanced degrees. So, that's something you could measure.
That's another objective way. Yeah, I think what we have is, again, we've kind of have a history here of using surveys to kind of define how things are going.
That's
here
what
at
I'm
the health
challenging the
system.
board is to think of, are there
Absolutely.
other objective ways
There are.
to look at
And what are the
people?
reasons why
There's a
we picked
myriad
this?
of ways I can imagine, and, you're better informed than most of us on what that myriad of ways might be. But, in May, we decided that we were going to use the Vizient goals this time and see if, see how that works out and to see if that stretches us. And if they don't, we can be open. All the things that you're talking about, we can measure this year if we want to. But these are the goals that we're recommending will go into the incentive compensation for 24-25.
There could be a whole discussion back to the incentive comp committee, because we've gotten audience input that was written saying, well, you have these ideas, you're talking about these, why aren't these part of your incentive?
Well, and we talked also after our retreat about engaging a professional company to help us with our goal setting. And not only that, but to help us with our CEO evaluation that would go hand in hand with this. And so those are things that are still pending at this point in time. But hopefully that'll give us more clarity as well.
I just had a question. Is the Press-Ganey survey the best gauge of physician alignment? There's other studies.
There's the Mayo.
Yeah.
Right.
So that is why I'm still here this evening.
Hello, Joy. And bless you, Joy, for staying in order to save your peace.
So this is Dr. Koch speaking regarding what is the best measurement for physician satisfaction, and I don't think Press-Ganey has been an adequate resource for that. The hospital does 3 different surveys that physicians complete. That is one of those 3. The SCORE survey is a second one, and then the Mayo Wellbeing Index is a third. And I recognize that changing horses in midstream is difficult, and I recognize and I greatly appreciate the desire to include physician satisfaction here. I think it's incredibly important. Obviously, as a physician, I would, but I also think it's been one of the missing pieces for the culture at the hospital here. And so I really appreciate that you're bringing it up. And I don't think Press-Ganey has done a good job of capturing the issues we've had, partly because people want to live in this community, and that's the reason they've been hanging in there with some of the difficulties we've been facing, partly because we like our colleagues, and so we have a good team, but the morale has still been incredibly low, and Press-Ganey really missed that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm hoping that you can come up with another method using one of the other 2 surveys that we're already doing, or yet a third option, in which case you'd have to have a baseline year followed by, watching progress over time. I recognize this is complicated, but that's why I felt it was useful to bring this topic up.
So is there a specific survey that you recommend?
I mean, the Mayo Wellbeing Index was the one that most clearly captured the dismal state of the medical staff. I don't know enough from the board side of this to know if that's a useful survey in that context.
So Dr. Evans, did we not have a presentation on that from Sam Smith? Is that the survey?
You did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so we have a history of at least 3 years.
Correct. We have, if you started with a new survey, you'd need to start from scratch. But we have 3 years or 4 years, 3 out of 4 of the last years we've done the Mayo Wellbeing Index. That's correct.
So we'd have to really look at what are those elements of the index versus what is it that Prescaney has, and where is the gap of information that we would still want to collect.
So,
Want to come up to the microphone?
So because
May
we
not
do
wanna
these
go
3
far,
separate
Dr.
surveys, first off, a few things on the well-being index. We don't have a great turnout on that from the last time I remember, so we have to try to increase who fills that out. Because we do that and the score survey, we opt out of some of those questions on the Prescaney survey. We don't pay for extra, so because they just took a survey on score, and so it just didn't seem right to have them fill out the survey on score and then add the same type of questions onto Prescaney. So that's why Prescaney doesn't have those questions. And we're kind of forced to do the score survey. We can't opt out of that survey. So for survey fatigue, for physician fatigue, we opted out of adding the well-being questions on the survey.
So again, we would have to look at what those questions are to really feel like.
I mean, I think that explains exactly why the Prescaney survey missed the physician satisfaction concerns. And if that's the measure you're using, then it's not valid. And it hasn't been valid. Yeah.
Well, I think that's something that we.
That's a good point.
Could review in terms of if we wanted to do that. But I would also like to have the questions from the two to really look at what is it that we're trying to capture and which test does it, which survey does it best.
I just also want to be clear that the questions that we look at in the survey for the physicians have nothing to do with their well-being. That the questions we were looking at is alignment, and alignment does not include the well-being scores in those types of questions.
And engagement.
And engagement,
And
which
engagement.
also does not include the well-being scores.
Right. This is supposed to be increasing the engagement score by 5%.
Right.
Because it was felt that if the physicians are engaged, they will be aligned.
Right. But we do still use the other information to make action plans, come up with solutions. I don't want you to think that we just take these surveys and we don't do anything.
So are you okay if for this year we continue with these are the proposed measurements for this year. We can refine them, we can do any number of things with them. We can make them sing next year.
Can I make one more quick comment,
Yes,
just
please.
to Michael's point? Next year, we likely will do employee and physician survey together. As a history, we've not done that because typically we had contracted physicians and employees. And so now that they're both employees, most of them, we'll probably do both surveys at the same time together so that we can get the results and so that we can do reporting for the next year and see the movement, because we haven't done an employee survey since 2022.
Yeah, actually approving this the way it's written will require we do another physician survey where we normally don't. We would skip a year. So it would require that we do one in 2025, of course. So, because we just did one, we just came off of one, right? And so that's our measurement or our baseline. So to actually say we're going to improve by 5%, it's improving from the scores we just received by 5%, and we'll measure that again in 2025.
Well, I have a suggestion, and that is, I don't think we're ready to approve this just the way we have it. I mean, I like the concept, but as Michael points out, there's some refinements. One of those refinements is to figure out which is the most accurate survey to use.
Right.
And I think we need to include the most accurate survey. You know, the problem with Press Ganey is it did not apparently include the same information that the Mayo one did. That's why the Mayo one registered dismal feelings on the part of the physicians, but that wasn't measured by Press Ganey. And I think that we can't do it without looking at the well-being of the physicians as one of our measuring tools. So I really think at this point we should send it back to the committee to take a look at that. You know, one of the other issues that was raised by a citizen was, you know, alignment with the environment, and we are taking a number of measures. I think that person suggested that the measure be the greenhouse emissions, but I remember when our survey was presented that we don't have a lot of control over that. But there are other things we could do. We could, you know, take 3 steps each year to improve on that, which is kind of what we have been doing. So I think the committee ought to at least review that issue and review the, you know, what's the best measurement of physician alignment. And I think it's not the Press Ganey ones, because there's significant parts of that that are not measuring what's going on with the physicians. So we either have to have a Press Ganey survey that includes that data, you know, we have to pay for that, or we have to use the Mayo Clinic data, which we have for 3 years.
So I have to ask, this year, we did the Press Ganey with the physicians. Did you also do a Mayo Clinic one as well? So that might be something that we could look at together, at least just this year, and figure out where we want to go. I really believe that what we have right now is a working document, and that we can tweak it. I'm not sure that I'd want to redo the whole thing, because essentially we're not going to be paying anything out. We only have 6 more, well, we'll have 6 months worth if we get a CEO by December. So again, there's
Right.
issues with that.
I just want to be clear that what is on the incentive comp in front of you is talking about engagement, right? It has nothing to do with well-being. So they're not tied together. So even if we add the questions to the Press Ganey survey next year, it's not going to impact that score, because that score is made up of a certain number of questions which do not include physician well-being. And
So alignment is different than well-being?
yes, and different than
As in
engagement.
And that's
Yeah.
that's a typo, that's supposed to be.
It's supposed to be engagement.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't have to be limited to one survey. I mean, it could be increased engagement by this and well-being by that.
It could be.
I mean,
Yeah, I would think.
We'd have to start aligning some of these surveys, right? Because, you know, we don't want to put something, I don't remember which month the well-being survey is done, but one of the things we try to do is make sure we do this survey towards the end of the fiscal year so that the changes we make have an impact.
Yeah.
And, right, like if I do a Press Ganey survey now, right after we just did this Press Ganey survey, it's going to be the same, you know? So we want to align those if we're going to be lining them up with incentive comp.
but your point's well taken. It's been made on other timing matters. How we're measuring, when we're measuring, over what period of time are we measuring?
Well, I would think well-being ought to be one of the considerations.
I think
as well
we should be
as
listening to
alignment.
our medical staff. What do they think is important?
Yeah, well, that's what I was thinking is, is it possible the medical executive committee could come up with what they think is the best survey?
I like the idea of including the medical executive committee in that discussion, and maybe Louis can lead that discussion, or Brian can lead that discussion, or Alex can be a part of that discussion. I think if we're left to our own devices, we're going to, talk in circles. Honestly, I mean, I just don't think we have the experience. That's not how we are trained or how we think. But I think that including us, having a conversation at the next MEC, and then with Louis present and discussing it, and then coming up with some measures would be appropriate.
Yeah, I think we would invite that and, honestly, it could improve physician alignment if we take that effort.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
And engagement.
Okay, well, my suggestion is that we send this back to the committee to do a few more things to tweak it. But I like the direction we're going. I love the idea of alignment with our overall aspirations and the existing goals. I just think it needs a little fine tuning.
Okay, well, so let us set aside the people component and move forward on the others if they meet with your approval. The one that we haven't talked about, of course, is really what we heard from Maria Martin earlier, which has to do with community. And we had, as I mentioned to Maria, we had, or Vizient chose as the 5-year aspiration to hit 10 of the healthy people targets by 29, and that they called out for increasing 3 of the targets in 2025 to a total of 5 targets having been met.
I'm okay with that.
Is everybody okay with that?
And to your suggestion, I'm okay with the 1, 2, 3, the first 4, unless Michael has some concerns about how you measure some of the issues there on cash reserves.
Well, and the question about the days to the third next available appointment.
Yeah, I would recommend basically, or my thought is, we'd approve the finance, the quality, and the community, and do a little tweaking on the service and access and the people.
Yeah, I think there's just some additional, frankly, words that need to be added to service and access in terms of kind of understanding the measurement period there. And then I just wanted to call out really quickly, with community, we are currently meeting 3 of the metrics. The goal for this year is to increase that to 5, so an add-on of 2.
Right.
Okay. You're absolutely
that's how
right,
it reads
Louis. It
today.
says increase from 3 to 5.
From 3 to 5.
You're
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, no, you're right.
And then, well, jumping around, so increase surgical procedures by 8%. I'm not,
What does that mean?
yeah, I
I'm
mean.
not quite sure why that one was called out by Vizient, except that I think they felt that that's where we were losing market share.
Yeah.
And, certainly there's all the ancillaries that go along with it.
There is actually a lot that goes into this. So obviously we have a market share discussion in terms of what's leaving the area. We also have kind of an efficiency discussion. So we have to actually, we can't grow the amount of operating rooms, at least in this measurement year, right? That would be impossible. So we have to utilize that operating room in that suite of operating rooms in the most efficient way. And there has been a ton of work that's went into that in terms of making sure that we're taking block time and making sure that it's being utilized. And when it's not utilized, it's given to a different specialty, which allows us to increase access in the community. So there's a lot of work that's went into ultimately trying to increase surgical procedures as well as access to those procedures here locally.
And the other thing is, I would like the committee to look at the issue of whether or not some type of environmental progress should be part of this.
The concern I have with that is that's nowhere on any of our goals.
Right.
5-year goals, 1-year goal.
Yeah.
It's completely outside the focus of the organization. That's not to say it's not important and we're not, taking steps to understand that. But in this year, it's nowhere in the organization's
We're
radar.
just getting information now.
Just getting started.
I don't think that program is mature enough
Yeah.
to be able to.
So that's not taking away from the importance of the program. I think it would be unfair to tie incentive goals to that.
And there, as you can see from my board report, there's a lot of work going into this right now. I mean, we are absolutely in, infancy stages, really working with other agency partners to kind of understand what they're doing. So I met with the school district yesterday, as well as the PUD and the town of Truckee. They've all got plans. They're happy to share those plans with us and work with us as we kind of go on this journey as well. But if, sticking to this, I would recommend to the board to maybe be looking at that as maybe a 5-year winning aspiration, or even maybe the second version of a 5-year winning aspiration. It's not going to stop our efforts here. There's lots of what I would say low-hanging fruit, but not something that we're ready at this point. At least staff's recommendation to the board is not something we're ready for in this as an annual goal.
And certainly it's something that we can measure all throughout the year in terms of how we're doing.
Right, and reporting that out.
Reporting it out. It's just.
And I think more than anything, the public wants to know that part of it.
That's the important thing. Yeah.
Well, I agree. I think if it's being focused on in other ways, in other arenas, that's okay. I just thought maybe we might want to consider it for this.
So does the board want the committee to take the whole incentive comp format back and just look at people? Do you want to approve those first 4? I think there was still some question about service and access.
Well,
the access, yeah.
We've kind of given an indication where we are. I think it's just send the whole thing back with a focus on the service and access and the people.
Yep.
Okay.
I agree.
So then we will work at bringing that back
Just
next.
table the whole thing until.
Or can you distribute this document for us to provide written comment back to the committee?
Sure.
Blind copy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
blank copy everybody.
Blank copy after that.
Okay, so that's what we'll do with this particular item. Now, we pulled the special meeting minutes from June 27th.
June 27th. I
27th.
think deleted
And
your name off the
add, add to the roll call. Is that where it goes? So if we add my name.
favorite board chair, so I want to
Yeah.
make sure you're.
Yeah, right. So can I have a motion to approve the special meeting minutes of June 27th with the addition of Chair Wong present?
So
I would
moved.
I wanted to,
Oh,
can I?
you take it.
Yeah, I would gladly make
Okay,
that
it's
motion.
late, guys.
Move to approve. I know, slap back.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from the Thursday, June 27th special meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, so those minutes are approved. Does anybody want to speak any more about their committee reports?
No.
Okay.
I'll just say the foundation met, but it was business as usual. Yeah, just planning events.
I will say that the Incline Village Foundation had a fundraiser and 680,000, Crystal, are you aware?
Yeah,
Is that the number?
680,000 was the last number that I received from
Yeah.
Carly Epstein. I think that's still possible to
With
grow.
more coming, yeah.
Potentially.
Yeah.
We are so appreciative for that community and the support we get out there.
It's amazing, it's, it reminds me of what John Dillinger the bank robber, was asked, why do you rob banks? It's because that's where the money is.
Yeah.
Well, the money is over in Incline.
All right, then.
Well, dedicated people there too.
They are.
They aren't the only place with money.
Yeah.
But they're a community that really appreciates the hospital, and they make tremendous efforts to make the foundation work for us. And we're very lucky to have the people that are in charge and putting that energy into it.
They are, yep. They're highly supportive of their hospital over there and greatly appreciative. Do I remember correctly that they closed that hospital on 2 previous occasions before Tahoe Forest bought it? I think that's the number.
Just swinging wide. Alice is getting loose with that gavel.
Hit it, Alice. Hit it, Alice.
You know what? The meeting's adjourned. You can ask that question afterwards.
Thank you.